Arianne said. Will you leave tomorrow also, she asked. I will. It's high time I return home and go back to Winterfell, he said. Arianne broke the hug and said, I will return to Sunspear a few days from now. Will you ever come to Sunspear? Robb looked surprised and replied, I don't know. But I do know that I hope to see you again, one day, Ari. Arianne looked up as he said that, smiling. Is smiling at me for calling her by her nickname or for what I said, Robb wondered. By the old gods and every weirwood tree in the world, why did you say that, Robb? What's wrong with you, Robb thought when he realized what he had said. He sweated, he now felt so hot and bothered, but in her presence, he felt as though he couldn't get angry. Arianne reached up and touched his cheek and stroked it gently. Robb felt happy when he felt her gentle and smooth skin on his rough and bearded cheek. Maybe one day, my handsome young wolf, she said gently before tiptoeing and kissing him on the cheek. Good night, she said. Good night, Ari, he said. As he walked to his quarters, all Robb could think about was how his aunt had tried to murder Jon Arryn and about Arianne's kiss. What is this? Is she still trying to seduce me, or does she feel the same way as I feel about her? What is it that I feel for her? Is it love? Robb's mind was awash with questions and remembering that night and what happened. The next morning, Robb left with Jory and the Stark soldiers. He had been wished a safe journey by King Robert, Lord Arryn, Lord Tyrion and Lord Stannis. Queen Cersei and Joffrey looked only too pleased that he was leaving. But the news across the whole Red Keep was that Littlefinger had been arrested for attempting to murder the Hand of the King. The position of Master of Coin was now vacant. Robb said goodbye to Harold and Gendry as they had left very early in the morning after a quick breakfast. Where will you go after you take her to Riverrun? Robb asked. Probably go to the Eyrie. My new home in the Vale is yet to be finished. It will be ready by the time that your sister and I are married, that I can promise, he said. It will be good to be back home in Winterfell, said Robb. I'm sure. And I'll be glad to say goodbye to this city for good and breathe the fresh and cool air of the Vale once again, Harold commented. I'm just looking forward to going for a ride through the Wolf's Wood. Though, whilst I've been here, I'm more than glad that we met, Harold, Robb said as he offered his hand. Harold shook his hand and said, I'm glad to have met you, Stark. Perhaps the next time we meet, I'll have improved my sword skill and finally beat you. Robb chuckled and turned to Gendry and said goodbye, Gendry Storm. It was good to have met you. I hope to one day see you a knight. I hope so too, my lord. Farewell and safe journey to you, Gendry said as the two shook hands. Robb said goodbye to Arianne at the gates of the Red Keep. Goodbye, Princess of Dawn, he said. Goodbye, Lord of the North, she said as she held his hand before he climbed onto his horse. Her hand felt so gentle and soft on his rough and calloused hand. Robb looked at her and said goodbye again before he climbed onto his horse. As he, Jory and the others left, he could feel Arianne's eyes on him. Gendry 3. They had left soon after saying goodbye to Lord Arryn and to Robb Stark. Gendry thought that this was the time to tell Harold of the truth about him. Other than Lord Arryn, he considered Robb Stark and Harold Hardang the only people he could fully trust. They were good men and honorable men and had no reason to like the Lannisters, and he thought of them as his friends. Both he and Harold were dressed in the surcoats and chainmail of House Arryn, and Lysa was locked inside the carriage which Lord Arryn had paid for. The doors had been locked with a tight lock which only Harold had the key to. The night before, when he was restraining her in the Hand's bedchamber, she had tried to bribe him with money and jewelry. My loyalty is to Lord Arryn, for he's done more for me than your money or your trinkets could ever do, he angrily replied before he tore off a strip of bedsheet and gagged her with it and rested the blade of his sword on her foot as they heard Savardis and his guards arrest Baelish. As they camped on the outskirts of the dark and cursed city of Harrenhal, Gendry decided that this was the time to tell Harold. Gendry had just finished stuffing a few slices of ham and bread through the door of the carriage, when he sat by the campfire with Harold. My lord, there's something I want to tell you. Harold had been drinking from his water skin and looking at the fire, but when he heard Gendry's words, he turned to Gendry. He looked expectant, as though he had been expecting something. I've been so scared of even saying this out loud because I was so paranoid of spies in King's Landing. You were right to be afraid of spies. Littlefinger had many of them, little good they will do him now, said Harold. Yeah, But the truth is, your lord uncle has been looking after me ever since I turned 8. I was homeless on the streets of King's Landing for 3 years after my mother died. He cared for me and paid for my apprenticeship at a blacksmith. I worked there until I turned 6 and 10, and then he offered to make me a squire for his nephew, to you. But it was after I had accepted, that he told me something that he had realized about me the day that we first met, Gendry said. Harold nodded and looked worried about what might be said next. What did he tell you? He said that I am a bastard and that I look a lot like my father, like King Robert, said Gendry, and out of instinct, he turned and looked around, still paranoid about the spies of King's Landing. Why did Lord Arryn want you to keep this a secret? He asked. Because he thought that Queen Cersei and Joffrey would want to kill me so that I wouldn't be a threat to Joffrey's claim to the Iron Throne, said Gendry. He told me to stay far away from them and any Lannister. And so, I did, Gendry finished. Harold nodded and said, I can see why you wanted to keep this a secret. And I'm honored that you would trust me with something that is obviously very important to you. Now, after all of this is over, where will you go? Gendry hadn't been expecting this question, but he had been thinking about what he might do if he was made a knight by Lord Arryn. I thought about going to the Stormlands. Truly, I'm a Waters, not a Storm, but Lord Arryn said for me to use Storm so that people wouldn't think that I'm a Kingslander. But I'll stay with you and with Lord Arryn until I'm a knight and I feel I'm ready, he explained. Good man, Gendry. I'm glad you told me this, said Harold, and they shook hands. Do you know if Lord Arryn has been doing this for any other bastards of King Robert? Harold asked. I don't know. I never asked and he never told me. If I could, I'd do something to help them if they were in trouble. I'd help them as Lord Arryn has helped me, he said. Harold nodded and said, and there's one I need to help also. Who? Gendry asked. Before I left for King's Landing, I had become a knight after winning a tourney in the Vale. I got so drunk in celebration, that I woke up the next morning, in bed with a tavern maid. A moon later, she told me that she was with child and that she hadn't been with any other man other than me. I gave her all my tourney winnings and I promised her that I would be there for my child. For though the child is my bastard, it's my blood. And I will do all I can for my child, he said. You're a good man, my lord. Just like Robb's father and how he cares for his bastard son, Jon Snow, Gendry commented. You're very kind to say so, Gendry. I just hope that Robb's parents and Lady Sansa won't be furious at me and think me an unfaithful shit. After Robb told me about his parents' offer of betrothal to Lady Sansa, I promised to the old gods and the new that I would never be unfaithful to my wife and that I'd always be there for my children and for my wife, he said. Why? You've never met the Lady Sansa, have you, my lord? No, but the fact that Robb thinks me a good man, good enough to marry his younger sister, I would never forgive myself if I broke the betrothal, said Harold. Do you intend on breaking that promise, my lord? Gendry asked. No, I do not. Though it's one thing to say something and another to act on it. Do you feel as though you can do what you said, my lord? Gendry asked. I hope so. I think so, Harold said. Then you can do it. You're a good and noble man. Robb's sister and his family will see that, as Robb already does, said Gendry. They arrived at the gates of Riverrun 3 days later, and at Riverrun's Great Hall, they were greeted by the young Lord Edmure Tully, who looked only a few years older than Arianne, and the elderly Lord Hoster Tully, whom looked the same age as Lord Arryn. Sir Harold Hardyng? Lord Tully asked as Harold and Gendry climbed from their horses. Yes, my Lord Tully, Harold said as he bowed his head, and Gendry did the same. Lord Arryn sent me a raven explaining the circumstances. But, my grandson, Robin. He is all right, he asked, whilst avoiding saying anything about the circumstances as he put it. He is recovering, my lord. He already was ill, but this only turned things from bad to worse. He is on his way back home to the Eyrie as we speak, Harold replied before handing the letter to Lord Tully. Lord Tully examined the seal of the letter, then he broke it and he opened the letter and read it thoroughly. He nodded and turned to them and asked, because of her grief, has she been given essence of nightshade to help her sleep? She has been, my lord. We've been giving it to her as often as we can. We gave her some with her breakfast an hour ago. She should be asleep right now, said Harold. Very good. Open the carriage and let's bring her back home, Lord Tully said. Harold unlocked the carriage door and Gendry opened it and saw Lysa inside, sleeping. He picked her up and brought her outside. Give me my sister, sir, said Edmure Tully. Of course, my lord, said Gendry, and he passed Edmure his sister. He called me sir, he thinks I'm a knight. I must look like one with the armor, and how Lord Arryn told me how knights and lords behave, Gendry thought with an inner excitement despite the situation. Oh, Lysa. I'm so sorry. No mother should go through such a thing. Everything will be okay, I promise, Edmure said as he held her in his arms and kissed her on her forehead. Take her back to her old chambers, Edmure. I'll send for Maester Vimen. She'll be okay. She just needs to be with her family, Lord Tully said to his young son and heir and patted him gently on the shoulder. Edmure was taking his sister inside, escorted by a few guards. Will any, other than the few of us, know of what she tried to do? Gendry wondered. Lord Tully faced Harold and Gendry and said, I would like to thank you both, sirs, for bringing my daughter safely back home. He passed both he and Gendry a small pouch of coins. Gendry put his in his rucksack tied to his horse's saddle. Thank you very much, Lord Tully, for such a generous gift. We shall not intrude on your hospitality for long, and we will leave for the Eyrie tomorrow soon after breakfast, said Harold. Very well. Has Lord Arryn sent you there? He asked. He has, my lord. He'll soon be sending young Lord Robin there to be at home and to be safe from all that has transpired at King's Landing, said Harold. Yes, I had heard it was the doing of Petyr Baelish. I cannot believe that he would be responsible for such cruelty and evil, when he was ward of my house and a friend of my daughters and my son. Nor that he would take advantage of my daughter and use her for his ambitious and nefarious schemes, said Lord Tully, in a hushed voice at the last part. Well, thank you again, and may the Seven grant you a safe and swift journey to the Eyrie tomorrow, said Lord Tully before he shook both their hands. Good day, Lord Tully, said Gendry. Good day, my lord, said Harold, and they climbed onto their horses and left the castle and rode into the town to find the nearest tavern. During their ride, Gendry checked the pouch Lord Tully gave him and counted 5 gold dragons and 50 silver stags, more money than Gendry could ever have seen in his lifetime. I will become a knight one day, Gendry thought with pride. Chapter 10, Chapter 8. Chapter text. Tyrion 3. Tyrion hadn't known Littlefinger that well, but he had known him to be an unpleasant and a dangerous man, though he found his brothels a true delight to visit. He also knew that both Renly Baratheon and Varys hated him. Indeed, they looked astonished when they had heard of his arrest. But never did Tyrion think that Littlefinger would have the balls to try and murder the Hand of the King, and accidentally poison the Hand's son in the attempt. He, Jaime and Cersei had heard the story from Grand Maester Pycelle. Though I have no love for Lady Arryn, I do feel pity for her. Her only son, nearly murdered at the age of 7, said Jaime. Cersei nodded whilst looking at Pycelle's table with a fearful gaze, as if imagining Joffrey, Myrcella or Tommen in Robin Arryn's position on Pycelle's table. When will the trial begin? Tyrion asked as the 3 children of Tywin Lannister left Pycelle's chambers. Tomorrow. Jon Arryn will be a judge, as will Stannis Baratheon, but a 3rd judge hasn't been decided yet, said Cersei. And who will be the Master of Coin? Jaime asked. Jon Arryn is apparently considering the choices. I had suggested Uncle Kevan. Father would never accept a position as low as the Master of Coin, replied Cersei. But Uncle Kevan would. I'm beginning to think that you don't like Uncle Kevan, sweet sister, said Tyrion with a smirk. Cersei ignored him, and Tyrion could see in front of them was Jon Arryn. Your Grace. Sir Jaime. Lord Tyrion. I wondered if I might have a word with Lord Tyrion, he said. Of course, Lord Hand, said Cersei with a cold smile. My lord, said Jaime, and the two left, together. It was a small and momentary glance they shared between them, but Tyrion saw it. He never missed a thing between the two of them. For a moment, he thought that Jon Arryn had seen it also. Lord Arryn, Tyrion said, bowing his head. Lord Tyrion. I am glad to have caught you, for I wanted to offer you the position of Master of Coin, he said. Tyrion was surprised. Never had he been offered the position of Master of Coin, or in fact any position on the small council. And yet, perhaps this is my chance. To show father what I can do and that I deserve to be the heir to Casterly Rock. Jaime can't inherit, he's in the Kingsguard. Tyrion knew that Jaime was always his father's favorite, but Jaime was only a soldier and did not share the deep love of duty, diligence and family that their father had, nor did he have their father's cunning, determination or willingness to fight without honor. Tywin Lannister however knew that Tyrion, his son whom he considered a disgrace, was a cunning and clever man and more than capable of playing the Game of Thrones and coming out on top unlike his elder siblings. Though the old Lion of Casterly Rock respected Tyrion more than he respected Cersei or Jaime, Tywin never forgave him for surviving his birth when his mother, the Lady Joanna, did not survive giving birth to Tyrion. One would think that I had deliberately killed her, moments after being born. Lord Hand, I am very honored with your offer and I would gladly accept, said Tyrion. Thank you, Lord Tyrion. But I would also like you to be a judge in the trial of Petyr Baelish tomorrow, he said. Of course, Lord Hand. Now, may I ask when I can start work as Master of Coin? Tyrion asked, eager to get started. Tyrion was going to spend the day at a brothel and then get drunk, but he only did these things when he was bored. At least this way, I won't get bored, he thought. Well, now actually. But first, there's something I would share with you and you alone in my office now, he said. They walked to the Tower of the Hand and Jon Arryn showed him a series of documents, taken from Littlefinger's office. For years I thought that he was a magician and could rub two coins together and conjure up a third. But he's borrowing it all, from the Iron Bank of Bravos and stealing a lot on the side for himself. Tyrion said after reading just a few of the papers. Yes. And it seems he's been doing this from his second year as Master of Coin, for the last 13 years. And to think that I had trusted him with the position of Master of Coin and considered him a close friend, said Jon Arryn. He looked sad as he perused the remaining documents on his desk. His son's near death has shaken him. I should end this meeting here, before it weighs down on him. My Lord Hand, I will get started on getting what money I can from all of Littlefinger's accounts and see what I can do about paying the Iron Bank of Bravos back, Tyrion said. You are a very good man, thank you, Lord Tyrion. But before you do, I want a full account summary of all debts that the Iron Throne owes to anyone. The Iron Bank of Bravos or any great house that we have borrowed money from. And I want a full amount of how much can be gotten from Baelish's ill-gotten wealth. Anything that can be used as evidence in his trial, said the tired and weary hand of the king before he yawned. I will get started right away, Lord Hand, Tyrion said with a bow and started packing the necessary documents from his desk and taking them with him to Littlefinger's old office. By the start of the Hour of the Wolf, Tyrion had gone through 5 cups of Arbor gold and had written a full account summary of what Littlefinger had borrowed from the Iron Bank of Bravos and from Tywin Lannister. 10 million gold dragons owed to the Iron Bank of Bravos, and 3.5 million to Tyrion's father. Littlefinger's personal wealth was more than 1 million gold dragons in King's Landing, though Tyrion suspected that there was far more elsewhere. Tyrion wiped an exhausted shower of sweat drip from his forehead and drank another cup of wine. He locked all the documents into the Master of Coin's storing box and he brought his summary with him to his own bedchambers. I'll reveal it to Jon Arryn at the small council session tomorrow morning, Tyrion thought. With all of this, Littlefinger will most surely have his head chopped off. There's no way that he can outsmart or buy his way out of this one. Tyrion slept well that night, but it felt weird to not have a whore to wake up alongside. But he was glad to not have to pay her. After all of his work yesterday, Tyrion started seeing money for what it really was and how dangerous it was to spend unnecessarily too much, especially Robert's habits of spending money on tourneys, feasts, wine, food and whores. If there was a war, that would drain money even more, but at least he would get fit for the war and stop being so fat, Tyrion thought. Tyrion had breakfast with his siblings and with his sister's children, though he took a special pleasure in annoying Joffrey. Upon seeing his uncle, Joffrey asked, "No whore with you, uncle? Has your tiny cock shriveled up? Oh, does that make you jealous, my young and impotent nephew? That I have a cock? Or is it because I use it for more than just pissing?" "Shut up, imp," said Joffrey angrily. Tyrion leant in towards his nephew and sniffed him. "Says the brainless maiden," Tyrion replied as he stood straight again. Joffrey blushed with embarrassment and walked away, furiously. "You've a good nose, little lord," said the hound, following behind Joffrey. A high compliment from a dog, Tyrion replied before sitting down for breakfast. Sausages, bacon, fish and toasted bread, Tyrion said to a servant. And to drink, my lord? Asked the servant. 2 mugs of ale, he replied. 2 mugs of ale, Tyrion. In the morning. Were you working all night? Jaime asked. On what? Writing to his whore of a wife. Cersei asked with a cruel sneer. Tyrion looked at his sister with an angry glare. And Jaime faced her with an unimpressed look. I think, Cersei, that was very unkind, Jaime said. Cersei ignored him as Tyrion remembered how he had been married at 7 and 10 to a peasant woman he fell in love with and fucked. Only to find out that she was a whore, arranged by Jaime for Tyrion to have a fuck. And then Tywin gave her to a barracks full of soldiers, and paid a silver stag for each man to have his turn. He never found out what had happened to her after that. No, but I have been working hard, for Jon Arryn has appointed me the new Master of Coin and a place as judge for Littlefinger's trial this afternoon, he explained as his breakfast was brought to him and a couple of mugs of ale. Cersei looked very outraged, whilst Jaime looked impressed. Congratulations, Tyrion. Finally, something for you to do here, Jaime said. Just what I was thinking, Tyrion replied whilst Cersei finally spoke her mind. Why did he give you this? Why, thank you for complimenting me on my good fortune, dear sister, Tyrion thought. Perhaps because he thought that a Lannister would be good at this job and that the only Lannisters here are Jaime, myself, cousin Lancel and you. So that left me. But fear not, Cersei, for maybe I'll pay Robb Stark to come down here again to discipline Joffrey when he needs it, Tyrion joked. Cersei hated him for defeating Joffrey, even after Jaime had unintentionally distracted him, and the fact that Joffrey had failed to backstab him after Robb had won and he was tackled down and punched by Sir Harold Hardyne. That northern savage and arrogant Vale Knight hurt Joffrey, their future king. They should be punished, Cersei angrily stated. Joffrey should have known what he was getting into when he challenged Robb Stark to a duel. And he had an unfair advantage over Robb Stark in that he had his own sword and was wearing armor, Jaime interjected. And he did try to murder the future Warden of the North after he had won said duel fairly, Tyrion pointed out. Joffrey was angry at him and he had been charmed by that Martell whore, Cersei said, trying poorly to defend her idiot son. That's no excuse for trying to backstab a defenseless man, thought Tyrion. When he becomes king, he will have to get used to beautiful women trying to charm him and he will have to learn to control his anger, Tyrion pointed out. There's plenty of time for him to learn. Not only about beautiful women and controlling anger, but also with swords, so that he doesn't lose to the likes of Robb Stark or to Harold Hardyne, Jaime added. He'll learn only what is important and what a king should learn, Cersei stated. Which is what, dear sister? Letting his mummy do all the work for him. Making all people fear him to the extent that they only tell him what he wants to hear and not what he should hear. Being feared isn't important if you aren't respected. If only father could see you now, you idiot. She really does think that she's too clever when she really isn't, Tyrion thought. At the small council session, he sat in between Renly Baratheon and Pycelle. Welcome to the small council, Lord Tyrion, said Pycelle. Thank you, Grand Maester, said Tyrion. Do you have the hand summary ready, Lord Tyrion? Stannis coldly asked, not wasting time in congratulating or greeting. Tyrion said, I do, Lord Stannis, before drawing out the summary, in an envelope sealed with the seal of the Master of Coin and holding it up for him to see. Stannis nodded curtly and Renly asked, what summary is this, as Tyrion tucked the summary back into his pocket. You'll find out in Baelish's trial, Renly, Stannis said severely. Despite being brothers, Stannis is not one to share details of importance before a trial, for Stannis has always believed in honor and justice and that everyone deserves a fair trial. And he takes this so seriously that he will never divulge anything. And at that, Jon Arryn entered and they began the session. Will Baelish's arrest and his trial affect commerce and trade, my Lord Hand? Asked Varys. No. Lord Tyrion assures me that he has it all well under control and that he should have a summary of what he kept from us all of these years and what other secrets he had, said Jon Arryn. The session had finished quickly due to the trial taking place, but Jon Arryn asked both Tyrion and Stannis to stay behind. What's the summary, Lord Tyrion? Asked the exhausted Hand of the King before he drank from a cup of wine. Tyrion drew the summary from his pocket and broke the seal and read it out. The Crown owes a total of 10 million gold dragons to the Iron Bank of Braavos and 3.5 million gold dragons to Casterly Rock, my Lord Hand, said Tyrion before he passed the summary to Stannis. Stannis slammed his hand on the table after reading it and then passing it to Jon Arryn. Stannis gritted his teeth together and frowned even more than usual, if that was even possible, and Jon Arryn put his head in his hands and sighed in exhaustion. "And how much did he steal for himself?" asked Stannis. 7 million gold dragons, if not more, from what documents I have seen. I would recommend a party of soldiers conduct a thorough search of the Baelish family's castle at the Fingers and see what is there. For though it may look like a shambled castle from a distance, if I was to hide stolen gold dragons in enormous amounts, it's where I would hide it all. It is a perfect place to hide gold from the unsuspecting eye, and it has perfect port access to Braavos, Tyrion suggested. Jon Arryn turned to Stannis for his opinion and he nodded and said, "A reasonable course of action, Lord Hand." Jon Arryn nodded and said, "Very well, I shall send a raven to Lord Nestor Royce this morning. Thank the gods that he didn't try and borrow from the Tyrells or even the High Septon." "What of Savardis' raids on Baelish's establishments in King's Landing?" Tyrion asked, knowing that Jon Arryn had sent the trusted captain of his household guards to search all Littlefinger's high-end brothels and taverns for evidence. "He tells me that they've come up with more documents of Littlefinger's correspondence and financial documents." "I'll need you to review those, Lord Tyrion," he said. "I'll look at them as soon as they are delivered to my office, Lord Hand," Tyrion said with a nod. And also, behind locked doors, in his office in each one, they found large chests filled with gold dragons. The total has come up to 2.5 million. And the sale of his establishments to the highest bidder could bring the Crown more funds. If Lord Tyrion reviews all of the correspondence and documents from Baelish's establishments and we have a total of how much money he had, then we can use most of it to pay off most of the debts that the Iron Throne owes to Tywin Lannister and the Iron Bank, if not all of them, said Stannis. "And then there's the search of his castle at the Fingers, and who knows what might turn up, Lord Hand. If it please you, I can organize the sales of Littlefinger's various establishments," said Tyrion. Jon Arryn nodded, considered their statements and said, "Very well. Lord Tyrion, view the documents as soon as possible and sell Baelish's establishments in the city, but we make no mention of our intentions or our findings at the trial. We shall just say that he has been embezzling Crown monies for a long time now. As he is Master of Laws, write a redacted summary up for Lord Renly to read out at the trial as key evidence, Lord Tyrion. Only include the parts that are relevant to the trial, mention nothing that would cause a panic or distrust in the small council." "I shall, my lord," said Tyrion. Both he and Stannis accepted Jon Arryn's decision and the three left. Arianne 4. At the trial, Lord Arryn, Stannis Baratheon and Tyrion Lannister sat at court on 3 wooden chairs whilst King Robert and Queen Cersei were viewing the trial from the front of the audience. Arianne Martell spoke first, telling the court Lord Baelish entered the Tower of the Hand, just as the hand of the king, myself, Lord Robb Stark, Sir Harold Hardyng, Lady Lysa Arryn and young Lord Robin were having dinner and congratulating Sir Harold's news that he had been accepted as a future groom for Lady Sansa Stark and that Lord Arryn was going to award him lands in the Vale. Baelish congratulated Sir Harold, and it was when he shook his hand, I noticed him almost spill the wine cup of the hand of the king. I thought little of it at the time, but then I saw Lord Robin try to drink from his Lord Father's cup, having earlier asked if he could drink some wine, only for his Lord Father to politely say no. He had just had a little sip, and then put down the cup when he started to vomit, and Lady Arryn panicked at seeing her young son fall sick in such a way. She stated. What was the accused's reaction to seeing Lord Arryn's son and heir fall victim to the poisoned cup and not the intended victim, the hand of the king, Princess Arianne? Stannis Baratheon asked dully. He looked shocked and scared. The hand ordered that Sir Harold rouse Grand Maester Pycelle and Lord Robb to bring Lord Robin to the Grand Maester's chambers. But soon after the Grand Maester had saved Lord Robin's life, I had told my suspicions to Lord Robb and then to Sir Harold. Once Lady Lysa and Baelish took Lord Robin to bed, we had told the hand of the king our suspicions, she explained, though she was careful not to mention Lysa's frantic reaction to the question of the cause. It had taken a long time to come up with an altered version of the events, for the morning after that night, she, Robb, Harold and Gendry had thought up what to say when asked about it. She had told Lord Arryn what she had come up with before the trial. he agreed to it and made sure that she spoke first, as she was the principal witness to the events with Lysa, Harold, Gendry and Robb no longer in King's Landing. Oh, Robb. She missed Robb. She missed his curly auburn hair, his enchanting and kind smile, his slight and growing stubble, his deep northern accent and his beautiful blue eyes, which felt like blue lakes to bathe and swim in. "What happened after you had told the Hand your suspicions, Princess?" asked Tyrion Lannister. The Hand was shocked. He was already scared after being in fear for his young son's life, and now to find out that the would-be assassin was a man he trusted. He told Lord Robb, Sir Harold and Sir Harold's squire, Gendry Storm, to bring their swords and come back to the Tower of the Hand. And as we returned, Sir Harold told us to be quiet for he could hear Lord Baelish talking to himself in a hushed tone of voice. He listened in on the Hand's command and then whispered to us that he was pacing up and down the dining room and he looked scared and was sweating and he was muttering how he failed and that he wouldn't be able to try it again, and then the Lord Hand told Sir Harold, Gendry and Lord Robb to get inside and arrest him. What did he do when these three men arrested him, Princess Arianne? Stannis asked sternly. He took a step back and was panting in fear, and when he saw the Hand of the King, I could see a look in his eyes as though he knew that he had been backed into a corner. He at first tried to reason his way out of this, but the Hand of the King wasn't going to be convinced, and then he ordered me to find Savardis Egen and inform him that he was to bring men and arrest Baelish. "Thank you, Princess Arianne," said Lord Arryn. Arianne bowed her head, my lords, and she took her leave and stepped down from the witness stand and walked back to her seat, sitting next to Daemon. The next to stand was Savardis Egen. Upon arresting Baelish, my men and I brought him to a black cell. On the way, he told me, "Release me, Savardis, and I'll make you a Lord of the Vale, a wealthy lord at that, and ensure your brother moves aside for you to take your place of your family home." "And your response, Savardis?" asked Tyrion. I slammed my fist into his side, my lord, and told him no amount of wealth or trickery can save you now. I personally stood guard outside of his cell, and then he started to make threats, saying that he had powerful friends inside and outside of the capital and that if I didn't release him, he would destroy me and my family. "Your vigilance and your dedication to your duty is a great testament to your character," Savardis complimented Stannis, in a stern way. If one didn't speak the common tongue, one could have misinterpreted that as a threat or an insult, Arianne thought with amusement. Several witnesses also gave evidence, though Arianne raised an eyebrow at highborn witnesses, including Lady Tanda Stokeworth, whom claimed that she always knew that Littlefinger was up to no good and that she only invited him to dine with her and her daughter Lollys to try and ascertain if he was up to anything. Arianne could tell they were lying from the way they sycophantically spoke. Before Pycelle could take the stand to testify about the poison used, Littlefinger stated from his chair, "I have served as Master of Coin for many years and have faithfully served the realm whilst increasing the revenue of the city and providing coin for the Iron Throne. I owe everything to my Lord Hand for raising me to my position as Master of Coin. I never would have achieved anything in my life had it not been for this great and good man. So that begs the question, why would I attempt to commit such a foul deed? You will be seated until you have been given leave to speak in your own defense, Baelish," Lord Arryn said angrily. He did so, and after Pycelle's testimony on the poison, the last to speak was Renly Baratheon. Arianne had heard many stories about him and Loras Tyrell. The worst kept secret in the Seven Kingdoms, she thought. "I have here in my hand, an account summary, written by Lord Tyrion Lannister, of the theft of crown monies stolen from Lord Baelish soon after being appointed the Master of Coin by the Hand of the King," he said to the audience upon taking the stand. Baelish's face whitened paler than Pycelle's beard when he heard Renly's statement. Arianne could see a slight smirk on the face of Renly as he spoke, and a large grin on Varys as he stood in the background. She didn't know that Renly despised Littlefinger, but she did know of Varys' loathing for Littlefinger from Varys' correspondence with her uncle Oberyn, and he knew of how cruel and how dangerous Littlefinger was. He would never miss the chance to see him be executed for his crimes, she thought. He'd probably have a hardened cock right now if his balls hadn't been chopped off. In his several years as Master of Coin, whilst using his position and the power that the Crown had entrusted him with, Baelish has stolen a total of well over 2.5 million gold dragons from the Crown and hiding most of it in his office and in his establishments all over King's Landing, Renly stated loudly and clearly for the whole court to hear. There was a lot of cries of outrage and fury directed at Littlefinger. She could see it on his face. He knew this time that it truly was over. When offered, he didn't try and defend himself. This time he said, "I demand a trial by combat." A trial by combat is only offered to those whose guilt is questionable, Baelish. Your guilt is clear for all the world to see. But, if you wish to fight as your own champion, then perhaps that could be accepted, Stannis said severely and with a dark fury which shut up Littlefinger. Last time he fought anyone with a sword was when he challenged Robb's uncle Brandon, only to lose and was almost killed by Brandon Stark. He knows he can't win when he's never used a sword since then. Even Gendry Storm could win against him whilst naked and unarmed. The judges came back half an hour later after meeting to reach a verdict. In view of the evidence of Petyr Baelish's attempt to murder the Hand of the King, nearly murdering young Lord Robin Arryn and stealing less than 3 million gold dragons from the crown whilst taking advantage of the powers that were granted to him by the crown, the court finds Petyr Baelish guilty on all charges, Stannis stated loudly and clearly. And from the court, there were loud cheers and calls for justice and for him to be executed. The guilty shall be executed 1 week from now at the Dragon Pit. Jon Arryn finished. Chapter 11, Chapter 9. Chapter text. Catelyn 3. Robb and his retinue had returned to Winterfell just 2 days before his 7th and 10th Name Day. Catelyn was so excited to see her son again. The last time he had sent a raven, he had told her about Littlefinger's attempt to murder Jon Arryn and nearly murdering his son in the attempt, and how he and his friends arrested him in Jon Arryn's behalf. Catelyn couldn't believe the news when she had first read Robb's letter. But according to Maester Luwin, they had received ravens from her father, Lord Hoster Tully, in Riverrun, and from her uncle, Sir Brynden Blackfish Tully, in the Eyrie, saying the same news. And Ned received 2 ravens from Jon Arryn and from King Robert stating the same also. Lysa loved him since the day he first arrived in Riverrun as a boy. But he loved Catelyn, something which made Lysa angry and take it out on Catelyn, as though Catelyn was deliberately trying to seduce Petyr and lead him away from Lysa only to spurn him. And when Brandon Stark came to Riverrun to marry her in the arranged marriage made between their fathers, Petyr challenged Brandon to a duel. Brandon easily won and stabbed him before Catelyn pled him for mercy and to spare his life. That was the last time she had seen Petyr, for he left to go back home to the Vale soon after. Catelyn liked him as a friend, but after he tried to challenge Brandon for her hand, she refused to ever see him again. "I should have let Brandon kill him, and my nephew's life wouldn't have been endangered," Catelyn thought as she remembered all her childhood memories of Petyr, Lysa, Edmure and her playing in the rivers and in the gardens. "So, tell us all about King's Landing, Robb. Did Jon Arryn have plenty to teach you?" Ned asked. "He did, father. I learned for myself just how dangerous the Game of Thrones can be, and one of the first things he had told me was how innocent small folk suffer the most when lords and ladies play the Game of Thrones just to rise above their station a little bit," Robb explained. Very true. Very true," Ned said. "What was Sir Harold like, Robb?" Sansa asked excitedly. "7 hells. You haven't met him yet and you're already in love with him." Arya joked, at which Jon, Theon and Bran laughed. "Shut up," said Sansa. "He is a very good man, Sansa. He is one of the most handsome men I've ever met. He is kind, he is brave, he is considerate, he has good manners, and he had saved my life," said Robb. "How did he save your life?" Sansa asked. "That's a long story and for another time. But no, he is a good and kind man and is very excited at the prospect of being your husband," Robb said. But Catelyn noticed how he tensed when he avoided mentioning how Sir Harold saved his life. "Did you meet any beautiful southern girls in King's Landing?" Jon Snow asked. Catelyn was angry that he was here. "He is a bastard and not a Stark, he shouldn't be here." But Ned insisted upon it, saying that Robb was his brother and he was of Stark blood. Catelyn would have ordered for him to leave if she hadn't seen how happy Robb was to see him and how they hugged. Robb blushed slightly and Theon, Jon, Sansa and Arya all laughed. A still blushing Robb finally said whilst in court there, "Jon Arryn had me and Sir Harold welcome an important guest to King's Landing." "Who? Was it Margaery Tyrell?" Sansa asked eagerly, as though she was excited at the thought of having the Rose of Highgarden as a future good sister. "No, she was Princess Arianne Martell of Sunspear," he replied. "Arianne Martell? Did she try and seduce Robb?" The stories of the Dornish princess' licentious adventures were infamous and well known. She hoped that Robb did not stray from his honor and did not fall victim to the Dornish seductress, Arianne Martell herself. "Did you too?" asked Theon eagerly. "No. We are friends. Though she did flirt with Harold and I when we greeted her at the harbor. And she is not at all like the stories about her suggest. She is very beautiful, yes, but she is also kind, she is clever and cunning and is loyal to her family and to her country," Robb said defensively. But Catelyn could see it in Robb's eyes even if his siblings and Theon could not. His feelings for her were more than that of a friend's. "What lands does Sir Harold have?" Bran asked. "Lord Arryn has appointed him as Lord of Swordsong, a new castle in the north of the Vale, on the coast below the Three Sister Islands. Previously House Hardang never had their own lands, they were just a minor house with a small keep in the Eyrie. It is in the middle of construction still, but it shall be finished by the time of your marriage to him," Sansa Robb said. "Right, all of you back to your studies. Robb is tired from his journey," Ned said to all of them. Arya groaned loudly at the thought of going to her studies. But then Ned said, "Robb and Sansa, come to my solar after dinner." Catelyn noticed during dinner how Robb's skin had been kissed by the sun to be a darker color and he shivered more than he used to when the cold winds blew in Winterfell's keep. It will take time before he is used to Winterfell's climate again, she thought. But she was glad that he was back home and that he was happy. Catelyn and Ned sat together with Grand Maester Lewyn in Ned's solar and were joined by Robb and Sansa. "Robb, I'm proud of how well you've done in King's Landing. This morning I received a raven from Jon Arryn. He told me of what a good man you are and that you will make a capable and an honorable Lord of Winterfell one day." "Thank you, Father," Robb said happily. "Now, tell me about Robert. How is he?" Ned asked. Robb's smile contorted into a grimace. "Father, Robert is nothing like what you had told me. He was always good and kind to me, but he's not the warrior he once was. He drinks and eats too much and spends more time with whores than he does with Queen Cersei," Robb explained. Catelyn knew from her time with Robert that he was an unsuitable king and that he was a warrior who only loved wars and fighting. But with no wars to fight, where does that leave such a great warrior? Ned looked shocked that his old and dear friend of many years could be like this now. "And his children? What are they like?" Catelyn asked. Though she already remembered what he had written in letters, she wanted to hear this from her son's own mouth. "Tommen is a sweet and kind little boy who loves kittens and loved to play with Grey Wind. Myrcella is a kind, gentle and delightful girl who loves flowers and is like any maiden princess. But Joffrey, he is not at all like them. He bullies them whenever he is angry at something or someone. He once murdered some of Tommen's kittens for his own pleasure. I did my best to protect them from him, but even now, I'm scared for them. No one deserves someone like that for an older brother and no woman deserves to be married to such a prick," he said. Sansa looked betrayed as though her fantasy image of Prince Joffrey was but a mask for what he truly is. "And Sir Harold had saved my life from Prince Joffrey." "What?" Catelyn asked angrily. "Prince Joffrey challenged me to a duel. I accepted. I beat him, despite him wielding a castle-forged sword and wearing strong armor whilst I wore leather training armor and wielded a blunted practice greatsword. But as I turned away after defeating him, he ran at me with his sword. And then Harold tackled him to the ground, punching him until I pulled him up and Sir Jaime Lannister dragged Joffrey away. That pompous and twisted little shit. How fucking dare that arrogant princeling, to try and murder my son." Catelyn wanted to ride to King's Landing, kidnap Joffrey and personally feed him to her children's wolves. "How much of that is public knowledge?" Ned asked with an angry voice which could silence a thunderstorm. Ned very rarely was angry, but this time, Catelyn could see a furious storm in his eyes that could start an inferno to melt the wall. "Almost none of it is, Father. Only those who were there and the Queen know what happened. Queen Cersei has more power than the King. Jon Arryn does his best to keep the Seven Kingdoms to order, but he is a good man whom is surrounded by ambitious and dishonest men. There are a few good and just men there, but that is it," said Robb. "Who are these good men?" Catelyn asked. "Stannis Baratheon, Renly Baratheon, Tyrion Lannister, Sir Barristan Selmy and, sometimes, Jaime Lannister. The Kingslayer." I didn't expect that, Ned said coldly. He can be a good man, father. He stopped Joffrey from trying to attack me and Harold after Harold tackled him. He had told me the story of when he killed the Mad King. Robb insisted. Breaking his oath to his king, Catelyn thought. Now, Robb, your mother and I have been making plans for a marriage for you. With Sansa marrying Harold, you will marry as soon as your bride is of age, Ned said. When he was mentioned alongside marriage, Robb looked hopeful. But when he heard the words bride is of age, he looked confused and unhappy. Of age? Who is she, father? For a long time, Robert wanted for the houses of Baratheon and Stark to be united. He had wanted that between him and your Aunt Lyanna. But now, he wants it between our children. We had been considering between Sansa and Joffrey, but you provided us with a safer alternative, he said. It took Robb a moment to realize what he was saying. Father, Myrcella Baratheon, he asked. Yes, Princess Myrcella, he replied. But father, she has only just turned 1 and 10. I'll be over 20 by the time that she is of age, Robb insisted. Only your father and I have considered this. We haven't brought the subject up with Robert yet. But we will, the next time that he brings this to our attention when he sends a raven. If he declines, then we will look elsewhere, Catelyn said. Now, the trial of Petyr Baelish. Is all of what happened true? Catelyn asked, eager to find out from one who was there. Robb faced her, he looked troubled as he heard her words. Well, what did you hear, mother? Robb asked. That Baelish tried to murder Jon Arryn, but Robin Arryn was accidentally poisoned from drinking a cup that was intended for Jon Arryn. Aye, that's true. Poor Robin, he already is very ill and with nearly being poisoned, it can't be good for his health, said Robb. How ill is he? Sansa asked. Very ill. It's not made any better by the fact that Aunt Lysa has been far too overprotective of him. She's in Riverrun now, Robb said. Riverrun? Why? Catelyn asked. The near death of her only son took a toll on her, especially knowing that it was the doing of Petyr Baelish. Jon Arryn assured me that their family will reunite when Robin is in better health and Aunt Lysa has recovered from all that has transpired, Robb replied. Poor Lysa. I haven't seen her in more than 5 years and now this. When her beloved Petyr nearly killed her son. I should see her soon, Catelyn thought. Soon after their meeting with Sansa and Robb, Catelyn found Robb walking around Winterfell, looking around and breathing in the air before stopping to look at the starry night sky. Happy to be back home, Robb. Aye, mother. The air in King's Landing stinks like nothing you've never imagined. It feels so good to just breathe cool and fresh northern air once again, he replied with a smile. So, what is there to know between you and Arianne Martell, she asked. She saw how his eyes had darted from the starlit and moonlit sky and to her. She saw how he blushed at the mention of her name. She is a friend. We got on very well in King's Landing, after she realized how I was not going to be seduced by her tricks, he explained. Robb, I know all too well of her reputation. Did you lay with her, she asked, worried that he would stray from his married bed. Will he be like Ned and do what he had done and force his wife to face the product of that affair every morning? No, I swear I did not. She flirted, flaunted her revealing dress, but I never looked down, I just looked at her in the face, which only seemed to encourage her more. But she stopped after a while and we became friends. She even helped me stop Joffrey from bullying Myrcella and Tommen, he explained. Catelyn believed him. He looked honest as he said it. But she could sense that he did have feelings for her. How could he not? For all her reputation, she is reputably a very beautiful woman, and if she is as Robb described, she would make a good wife to him. But he is the heir to Winterfell and she is the heir to Sunspear. It would be a complicated situation if they should marry. Harold 4. She looks just like you, milord. She has your blonde hair, your blue eyes and your nose, said Sissy. In Sissy's small shack in the Eyrie, Harold looked at his daughter laying fast asleep in her bassinet. Using the money that Harold had previously given her, Sissy had bought a bassinet for their child and 4 trips to see a maester to ensure that she was healthy. 2 weeks before his return to the Eyrie, Harold's daughter was born, a little girl called Alis Stone. Harold looked at this beautiful little girl and thought, yes, she is my daughter. Even if she is a bastard, I will do all that I can for her. Will you care for her, milord? Sissy asked, her small, but pretty face in a hopeful smile as she asked, and her long dark brown hair falling just below her shoulders. Sissy, we have a daughter together. A beautiful young daughter. You must call me Harold, he said. All right, Harold. But you will help me raise her. Won't you? I can't raise her on my own. My father called me a whore when he found out and threw me out of my home and told me to never come back, she said with pleading eyes. Harold had listened to Gendry's stories of growing up unpleasantly on the streets of King's Landing, and he had heard the stories of how hard it had been to raise a bastard from various women he had met in his adventures in the brothels of King's Landing. My daughter will not grow up like Gendry had done, nor any other poor and unfortunate bastard of the Vale, Harold thought as he faced Sissy. If only all bastards of Westeros could be shown the same kindness and consideration as the bastards of Dorne. Soon my lord uncle will award me lordship of a castle in the north, called Swordsong. When he does, I will bring you with me, as a handmaiden for my betrothed, and Aelys will have a safe place in my castle and grow up alongside my children with my future wife. I promise you that she will always be safe and taken care of, he said. Betrothed? You're getting married? She asked. Her hopeful smile had turned to a low and unhappy frown. Sissy, what happened between us was because I was drunk. And I'm a knight and soon I will be a lord. These things are expected of me from the lords and ladies of the Vale, and especially from my uncle, Lord Arryn. I'm to marry a lady from an old, proud house which used to be king's. I'm sorry, but this is all I can offer you. But I promise you that I will do all that I can for you and for our Aelys, he said. He then pulled out his coin sack that had been given to him as thanks to him from Lord Tully. He had counted the amount, 5 gold dragons and 50 silver stags. This should be enough to pay for your travels to Swordsong and buy a house there. It's still under construction, but it should be finished by my wedding next year. You and Aelys will always have a place there, I promise, he said, promising her yet again. Finally, she nodded and said, I believe you, Harold. Thank you. He smiled and gave her a gentle hug and then knelt to kiss Aelys' head. I love you, little Aelys. And I will always care for you, love you and be there for you. I promise, he whispered. He said goodbye and left and returned to the Aerys main keep. Robin was due to arrive in a week, but Lord Arryn was still in King's Landing. A day after meeting Sissy and Aelys, Harold had gone to the Crescent Chamber of the Aerie, where he was greeted by the lords and ladies of the Vale, Bronze Yohn Royce and Lord Nestor Royce, Lady Anya Waynwood, Lord Benedar Belmore, Lord Eon Hunter, Lord Drold Grafton, Lord Royce Coldwater, Lord Edmund Waxel, Lord Uthor Tolet, Lord Roland Longthorpe, Lord Tristan Sunderland, Lord John Linderley, Lord Gardrick Borrell, Lord Lenal Corbray, Lady Maladonna Moore, Lord Horton Redfort and Lord Simon Templeton. He was to give a full testimony of what happened in King's Landing to the assembled lords and ladies. He remembered the story that he, Robb, Gendry and Arianne had come up with well enough. How could he not? He had spent most of the journey to the Vale thinking about that, when he wasn't thinking about Sissy and their child. But as he walked to the Crescent Chamber, waiting at the entrance was someone he never ever wanted to see again. Selyn Corbray, the younger brother and heir to the childless Lord Lenal Corbray of Heart's Home. No. No. Why is he here? He remembered him well enough from his time as a squire to Bronze Yohn Royce. Seeing him there brought back many terrible memories of Harold's. Selyn was hated and feared by many, including his own older brother and his younger brother Lucas. Harold's fingers fidgeted and he was panting through his nose as he tried not to cry at what Selyn had tried to do to him. Seeing him here made him want to run away and never look back. Selyn was a famously skilled swordsman and wielded the Corbray family's Valyrian steel sword, Lady Forlorn, which he had wielded with distinction in the Battle of the Trident and had killed Sir Luwin Martell. Whilst Harold was a squire, Selyn creepily sneered at Harold on many occasions at tourneys. He saw him give the same sneer to many boys, some younger than 10. When he had turned 3 and 10, Harold had been practicing in the yard at a tourney in Iron Oaks, alone, and at night. He was using a practice sword and he heard a creepy voice behind him say, "Do you know how to use that, little Harold?" He turned around to see Selyn, again with that creepy sneer, which just made Harold shiver. "Come here," he said. Harold shivered again and he scared of what he was going to do. "Come." Here. Now he said, this time his creepy smile turned into an evil and leering grin. No, said Harold, frightened. Are you sure about that, little boy? There are so many things I could do and no one would care about you or believe your word against mine. I could take you now. I could kill you. But I also could have you made a knight. All you need to do, is to come here and take your clothes off, lay on the ground, open your legs wide and lay still. Harold walked to him. Yes, good boy, he said. And then Harold thrust his blunt practice sword onto Selin's unarmored leg. Even if it was blunt, he still screamed and clutched his injured leg whilst Harold ran. It was from then on, he had always carried a castle-forged dagger. And he had promised himself that one day he would kill him and finish what he should have done back then. And it was at the tourney at Runestone, which had seen Harold knighted, where Harold had unhorsed Selin in jousting. He broke into his apartments and switched his armor piece with one made of wood and painted to look like steel. He also broke the steel fist on his lance shaft until it was naught but some very sharp steel shards. He had aimed his lance at Selin's cock and balls and he fell down from his horse and onto the tourney field's barrier. Harold took a special pleasure in watching Selin being taken away on a stretcher by Maestus, screaming, whilst small folk and nobles alike were laughing at him, for the lance shaft impaled through his crotch was there for the world to see. Though Harold was angry that he had survived, he was pleased that because of the sheer force of the lance and the many splinters of the lance and few steel shards of the lance shaft in both his cock and his balls, he had to be emasculated. Sir Harold. So nice to see you back home, he said with a twisted and evil smile. Selin. Your voice, it's not as strong or as powerful as it once sounded. I wonder why? Harold asked after he stopped himself from clenching his jaw in the same tone, which earned him a deep scowl from Selin. One day soon, you evil fucking scum, I will kill you, Harold promised as he stopped himself from shivering and shaking. He was not a weak squire anymore. He was a knight and an experienced one at that. Sir Harold Hardime, your testimony, please, on the events involving the attempted assassination of our liege lord, the hand of the king, said Lady Anya Wainwood, his aunt, guardian and friend of his late mother. Harold bowed to the assembled lords and ladies of the Vale and gave his whole testimony of what happened, but using the fabricated story made up by he, Rob, Gendry and Arianne. A terrible thing to happen to so young a boy, said Lord Nestor. But as he said it, Harold could see a smirking sneer from Selin. The fucking evil scum. How many innocent boys has he raped or tried to rape? I will fucking kill him for what he tried to do to me and what he did to them and what he could to others if he had had the chance, were he not a eunuch, he promised before he turned his eyes to the center of the court of the Crescent Chamber. Where is Lady Lysa now, Sir Harold? Asked Lord Eon Hunter. The events of King's Landing were devastating for her, Lord Hunter. She has always been protective of her son, but a man she considered a childhood friend, to nearly kill her only beloved son, was very difficult for her to accept. Following Lord Arryn's orders, myself and my squire escorted her to Riverrun to be at her childhood home and to recover from what she suffered and be with her father and brother. You've done well, Sir Harold. On behalf of the Lords of the Vale, we thank you for your dedication to your duty to your liege lord, said Bronze Yohn Royce. The lords and ladies of the Vale all clapped for him and he bowed his head to them. But then, suddenly, a sword was drawn from behind him. He turned to see Selin pointing his Valyrian steel sword at him directly. Selin, what is the meaning of this? Lord Royce Coldwater demanded furiously as guards at the doors reached for their swords and even the moon door was opened. Whilst I commend Sir Harold's duty, he and I have unfinished business. He deliberately crippled me at the tourney at Runestone. I will have my justice. My lady thirsts for blood, he angrily shouted whilst waving Lady Forlorn around a few times. It was a joust, Selin. You entered it willingly. No knight or man of noble birth enters a tourney without knowing full well of the risks he takes by entering it, whether he would be wounded, injured, crippled or killed. Or in your case, emasculation, said Bronze Yohn. He aimed his lance at me, which led to my emasculation. I will have my justice, here and now. Selin shouted, his face turning red with fury. A trial by combat. First blood or to the death? Aunt Anya asked fearfully for her nephew Harold's life against a man of Lyn Corbray's reputation and skill. Yes. To the death, he angrily replied with an evil smile. "Do you accept his challenge, Sir Harold?" asked Lord Nestor. "I do, my lord," said Harold without hesitation, eager for revenge and for justice. "I will not die today, you fucking coward. I will kill you," Harold thought as Gendry gave him his sword and shield. He dressed in his chainmail armor and looked at Selin, whom was heavily armored and wearing a thick helmet with a visor. "No amount of armor will save you from me," Harold inwardly threatened. "Good luck, my lord," said Gendry. "I'll definitely need it today," said Harold as he drew his sword and stepped forth. He readied himself as Lyn laughed at him and stood ready and whispered, "I'll kill you and then I'll kill your little whore and her daughter. Now, you've really made me fucking angry." "I'm not afraid of you," Harold thought as he gripped his shield and sword tighter and imagined giving him a slow and painful death for daring to threaten them. "Careful with your sword, eunuch, you've already lost a lot from, an accident with a lance," he whispered back. "I offer one last chance for this duel to end peacefully." "Do you withdraw your accusations, Sir Lyn?" asked Bronze Yohn. "No," he said coldly. "Very well. Begin." At that, Lyn waved Lady Forlorn around arrogantly and he charged at him. Harold dodged his blow and struck at his shield a few times, pushing him back when he realized what he was doing. He was trying to use the strength and power of his Valyrian steel sword to kill him. And then he remembered a story from Sir Barristan Selmy, of how he was defeated by Lord Howland Reed at the Battle of the Trident. He stabbed Howland Reed's shield, but it pierced so far, that he couldn't pull it out, and then Howland Reed swung his spear at Sir Barristan's face, the palm of the blade striking him on the side of his helmeted face and knocking him out. "That's how I'll kill this evil fucker," Harold thought. And so, he jumped and struck at Lyn's shield, knocking him back a few steps. From his days of fighting with Robb, he had become a better fighter and he also felt more confident and stronger and faster. Their swords met in midair. Lyn tried to cut down on his arm. Harold blocked his blow with his shield and stabbed at his armor. It didn't hurt him, but it did push him back. He swung his shield at Harold's shield. Harold parried the blow with his shield and though he was stunned by the blow, he dodged his sword blow and slammed both his sword and his shield at Lyn's shield. This pushed him back and as he fell back a foot, Harold smashed his shield into Lyn's helmet's visor and then bashed the pommel of his sword's handle onto the roof of Lyn's helmet before dodging a panicked slice of Lady Forlorn. Lyn lifted his helmet's visor, for the shield blow to it had battered it, and from what Harold could see of how he was walking, he was dizzy. He tried to cut at Harold's shield, but Harold blocked his blow with his sword and then tried to slam his shield down on his sword-wielding hand. He missed, and Sir Lyn cut at his shoulder with his sword. The sword had sliced through the chainmail and cut into his flesh. Harold felt blood drain down his arm. "Fuck. That fucking hurts worse than every time I got hit by a fucking lance." Harold dodged the next blow and jumped back and got up to his feet, grunting and panting. He looked at his bleeding arm. "Fuck. Fuck. Fuck. What do I do?" He then started to feign exhaustion, by leaning on his shield. Lyn took off his battered helmet and he evilly grinned when he saw Harold pant and look with fear at his cut shoulder. He laughed darkly before leaning in a little. "I'm going to make you and them suffer for what you did. You really should have let me fuck you," he whispered to Harold as he walked closer, looking too confident of his victory. But Harold stood up and stood ready to fight. Lyn looked surprised and then he cut down on his shield before trying to stab him. Harold blocked his thrust with his shield, and the Valyrian steel sword pierced straight through, cutting Harold's left cheek. As he tried to pull it out, Harold pushed his shield further down to the ground, to give himself time. "I'll never get this chance again." And then, Harold roared as he sliced his sword down on Lyn's sword-wielding hand. He threw down his broken shield as Lyn screamed. He stared at his bleeding stump where his hand used to be and he screamed and cried before he looked up at Harold, who took off his helmet, and looked down at him with a dark and deadly fury as he pointed his sword at his hated enemy. "I've been waiting for this moment for a long fucking time, you evil shit piece," Harold thought as he panted through his nose. He started to walk backwards as he pleaded, "Please, Sir Harold. I beg your forgiveness. I am at your mercy. I was wrong to challenge you. It was a game, just like Lord Royce said. As the victor, you deserve Lady Forlorn far more than I do. Please. Take it. To the death." Like you said, Harold replied, and then he swung his sword at Lynn's exposed throat, and he was gasping loudly as he clutched his profusely bleeding throat with his one remaining hand before he lost his footing and fell through the moon door. Harold took a few deep breaths and grinned that he finally had killed him for all that he had done, for all that he had tried to do to him and all that he had threatened to do him, to Sissy and to Alice. Careful you don't impale yourself in the rocks before you hit the ground, you evil fucking cunt. May you suffer in the 7 hells forever, he thought. The trial is concluded. Sir Harold, as the victor, do you wish to take Lady Forlorn as your sword as you are entitled to it? Asked Bronze Yone as the moon door was closed. Harold looked back at the sword and he sheathed his own sword and pried the severed hand off of the sword after drawing it out of the shield, breaking it in the process. He always liked the idea of having a Valyrian steel sword to one day pass on to his eldest son. But it rightfully belongs to another family, he thought. A noble family that behaves with honor, barring one evil fucking cunt. No, my lord. I am no thief and it rightfully belongs to Lord Corbray, he said before turning to Lord Lionel Corbray and offering him the sword. Lord Lionel looked pleasantly surprised at his offer. Thank you, Sir Harold. Thank you, he said before taking the sword, looking uncaring and unemotional over the death of his brother. The lords and ladies said their approval of his action, and then Aunt Anya called for Maester Coleman to treat Harold. Even Harold had forgotten about his wounded shoulder and cheek. Chapter 12, Chapter 10. Chapter Text. Arianne v. Arianne had left King's Landing for Sunspear a day after the trial. She disliked being in King's Landing and wanted to be back home in Sunspear. But she was glad to go knowing that Littlefinger would be executed after hearing what other crimes he had been accused of at his trial. No wonder Varys hated him so much. All of what I have done should impress father that I am deserving and worthy of Sunspear rather than Quentyn. On the first night of sailing home, Daemon appeared in her cabin and asked, "Do you want to?" "No, Daemon. Leave me alone tonight. I just want to sleep," she said. Daemon looked surprised before he left. Arianne looked out at the sky from her cabin's window and looked north. "Damn you, Robb Stark. Why did you have to make me feel this way about you? Now I don't even have any fire in me like I used to. I'll write a raven to him when I get back to Sunspear," she decided as she thought about it before climbing into bed and trying to sleep. What if his parents arrange a marriage for him to the daughter of a northern lord or Margaery Tyrell, she thought as she closed her eyes. No, Mace Tyrell wants his beautiful Rose of Highgarden to become the queen. She won't marry him and live in the north. And the Tyrells and the Reach think of the north as a horrible wasteland and the northerners as savages and wildings, she realized. It had taken 2 weeks to sail from Sunspear. The way back to Sunspear is longer than when we sailed to King's Landing, she thought. She had Demon Sand to warm her bed and pass the time. But now, she didn't want him in her bed. She just prepared writing a full report for father to send to him from Sunspear when she arrived rather than wait a long time before going to the Water Gardens. And she was also writing a letter to Robb. Will I ever see him again, she often found herself wondering. Would he ever visit Sunspear or should I visit Winterfell, she asked herself. I should talk to my cousins and see what they can suggest to me, she thought. But if they try to entice me into sharing him with them, I'll slap them. They won't touch him. He's mine, she thought when she remembered the games that she, Oberyn, Nymeria and Tyen would get up to Sunspear with handsome men and beautiful women. It was good to get back to Sunspear. Soon after arriving in the old palace, Arianne had sent a raven with her report of King's Landing to the Water Gardens for father. She had made good mention of her friendships that she had made with Jon Arryn, Robb Stark, and that she took part as a witness in the trial of Littlefinger. And then she had sent the raven to Winterfell and to Robb Stark. She felt her heart sprinting as she sent the raven and remembered his handsome face and how soft his auburn curly hair was and how much she enjoyed running it through her fingers, even though it was just once she had done it. Whilst walking around Sunspear the day after her return, she saw an old woman at a stall near a fountain saying, "Tell your future for a coin. Tell your future for a coin." Arianne wanted to know if she would be with Robb. I must know, she thought as she walked toward her and sat opposite her. Just one question, she said as Arianne sat down and she held her hand out for a coin. Arianne drew a gold dragon out of her money pouch and placed it into her hand. She eyed the coin greedily and pocketed it before facing Ariane with a smile. "What is your question, Ariane Nymeris Martell?" "Will I marry soon?" she asked, scared of tempting fate by mentioning Rob's name. The fortune teller had a small sack of what sounded like tiny stones in her hand. She shook the sack around a few times before opening it and putting her hand inside it. She picked out some of the contents, little clay tablets with carvings on them, and laid them on her little table, 4 in total. She stared intensely at each one and squinted her eyes at them, as though determined not to miss a secret from each one. She pushed the first one toward Ariane. "You will marry not this year, but next year." Before Ariane could ask another question, she pushed the second tablet toward her. "Your husband will bring your family 2 things that they've wanted for a long time." Ariane waited this time, wondering what the third and fourth tablets would say. She pushed the third. "You and your husband will live in a place foreign to you both." "Foreign? What could that place be that's foreign to me and to Rob?" The fourth and final tablet was pushed towards Ariane. "Your marriage to him will come after he loses someone dear to him." "Thank you," said Ariane as she left the fortune teller and walked back to the old palace. "Not until next year. That's so long away. But will my husband be Rob or someone else? And why would we live in a place foreign to both of us? Does that mean that father will take away my birthright to Sunspear? Will he give it to Quentyn? Rob v. On his first day of returning home to Winterfell, Rob had fought both Theon and Jon Snow in a series of duels. It used to be that Jon would best Rob after more than an hour of fighting. But now, it was becoming an even fight between the two of them. Rob was now a better fighter and was an even match for Jon. "The Southerners taught you a lot," it seems, Jon remarked after being beaten by Rob. On his name-a-day, all of Winterfell was celebrating, it seemed. In the Great Keep of Winterfell, Rob was welcoming visiting lords and ladies from all over the north, his father's old friend Howland Reed, Jon Greytion Umber, Rickard Karstark, Wyman Marndale, Roose Bolton, Mage Mormont, Roderick Risswell, Barbary Dustin, Harlys Hornwood, Meja Sawin, Hellman Tallheart, Galbart Glover, Brandon Norrie, Hugo Vull and Lysa Flint. Rob was also dancing with the young ladies of these families, Aelys Karstark, Daisy and Alysanne Mormont, Edara Tallheart, Winifred and Wyler Marndale, Joan Elsewin and Aranna Umber. But whilst he put on a brave face for the dancing and talked pleasantly with these ladies, he missed Ariane. He remembered his feelings for Ariane when a raven from Sunspear had arrived. It was from Ariane. "To the heir of Winterfell and the North, Lord Robb Stark. It feels like such a long time that we last saw each other in King's Landing. I remember the times that we spent together very well. I can't believe that I'm writing this, but Rob, I miss you. I truly did enjoy your company and I hope to one day see you in Sunspear, or perhaps I'll see you in Winterfell. I look forward to your reply, Rob. Princess Ariane Martell, heiress of Sunspear and Dawn. I miss her too. But my duty is to House Stark, and father says that I will be betrothed to Myrcella Baratheon and marry her when she is of age. But I don't want to marry her," Rob thought as he lay on his bed and looked out at the night sky and at the beautiful stars. "I wish I could see you now, Ariane. I miss you too." He could remember her face and everything about her, but wanted to see her in person again. "I must write a reply to her. I cannot lie to her and keep this from her. She deserves the full truth of this," Rob thought as he began writing a letter to Ariane. There was a knock on the door. "Rob, are you coming to the feast?" "It is your name-a-day," said Jon. "I'll be down soon. I just want to finish writing this letter," he replied. "Oh. Who is it to?" "Sir Harold," he asked. I said Rob, which was a half-lie, for he was going to write a letter to him too. "So has father promised you to any of the women downstairs?" Jon asked. "No, not them. To Princess Myrcella Baratheon," he replied. "Oh. Is that bad?" Jon asked, seeing Rob's sullen reaction. "She's the same age as Bran. And she's such a sweet and kind girl. Other than her fucking prick of an older brother and evil hellcat of a mother, she is a good person, but she loves it in King's Landing. She wouldn't like it up in the north. And it'll be a long time before she is of age," Rob said. "But bearing that in mind, how would any marriage between Ariane and I work? For she loves living in Sunspear and I love living in Winterfell. What does this mean?" Was this always just a silly attraction between us which would never lead to anything more than what it already was, just an attraction between two people from different worlds? Would I give up my birthright to Winterfell to be her husband and prince consort in Sunspear? Or would she give up her birthright to Sunspear to be my wife and Lady of Winterfell? Robb's mind was awash with doubts about his future and Arianne's future and guilty feelings about what might have been and what could have been between the two of them. "I'll see you down there," Jon Robb said as he continued writing to Arianne. "I see you down there," he said. Robb finally finished his letter and then started writing a letter to Harold. He missed his best friend also, and he missed Gendry, whom he considered a friend, and hoped that they could start writing letters to each other. He finished the letters and walked to Maester Luwin's quarters. He knocked on the door. "Enter," he said. Robb opened the door and Maester Luwin greeted him. "Good evening, my lord. Are you not dining at the feast?" "No, Maester. I wanted to finish these 2 letters," said Robb. "Very good, my lord. Where to?" he asked. "This one to Sunspear and this one to the Eyrie," said Robb, separating them on his desk. "Very well, my lord," he said. "Oh, my lord, could you give this to your lord father?" "It has just arrived from King's Landing," he said. "Of course, Maester," he said, and he took the letter, sealed with the seal of the hand of the king. More news from Jon Arryn, Robb thought. He returned to the feast, though he took a moment to look his best again and not upset over writing to Arianne, potentially ending things between them. Robb found his lord father at the high table seated next to mother, and he walked to them with the letter. "Father, this just arrived from King's Landing," he said. "You best stay for this," Robb father replied as he took the letter. Robb felt proud that he was now being included with his parents in important meetings. They now valued his opinion and thought him a man and not a boy. The letter was opened and he quickly read it and said, "Littlefinger is dead. Beheaded in the dragon pits." And when Lord Yohn Royce searched his castle on the Fingers, they discovered less than 9 million gold dragons. What? 9 fucking million? You could buy the 3 sisters with that amount of money, maybe even twice or thrice over. Robb knew that Littlefinger was guilty of stealing money, but he had no idea that he had stolen as much as that. "Was there anything else, Ned?" Mother asked. "Jon Arryn says that his son has returned to the Vale and he has received word that Lysa is resting and recovering from all that has happened in Riverrun and is receiving the best possible care," he said. "Now, only she, Lord Arryn, Grandfather Hoster, Harold, Gendry, myself and Arianne know what really happened," Robb thought. But then he thought again of Arianne as her name crossed his mind. Robb left the feast yet again and stepped outside of the Great Keep and just sat outside, trying to get some peace and quiet. He heard the flapping of wings and he looked up to see 2 ravens leaving the Great Keep. One heading to the Eyrie and one heading to Sunspear, he thought. "I'm sorry, Arianne." Tyrion 4. Littlefinger was beheaded at the Dragon Pit and the deed was carried out by the unpleasant and forever silent Sir Ilyn Payne, former captain of Tywin Lannister's household guards. A man whose tongue was ripped out by the order of Mad King Aerys for insulting him in favor of Tyrion's lord father. And now he was the royal executioner. A day after his execution, he reported to Jon Arryn and Stannis Baratheon in a private meeting, "I've finished going over everything in Littlefinger's remaining statements and records. I think that there's far more than we had anticipated in his castle at the Fingers, and there was also mention of a very exotic palace in Braavos, which would be a perfect place to relax before or after a trip to the Iron Bank, if I were doing what Littlefinger was doing." The previous day, Tyrion had sold Littlefinger's brothels and taverns for a combined total of 1.5 million gold dragons. "Would the Braavosi government allow us to search his palace?" Stannis asked. "I'll see what Lord Varys can arrange, hopefully he has contacts there that can help us." "What else did you find out, Lord Tyrion?" Jon Arryn asked. "It turns out that the wealth found at Littlefinger's establishments were all AIS profits from his business. Dirty gold building clean taverns, one might say. And as for the wealth in the Fingers, a rough estimate would be well over 7 million gold dragons. More than enough to pay off the Iron Throne's debts to Tywin Lannister and to get to a good start on paying back the Iron Bank. And if the Braavosis allowed us to search his palace in Braavos, then we would have more money to pay off debts and extra money in the future if needs be to save the crown from getting bankrupt ever again," said Stannis. Jonarin nodded, but then he looked out of the window of his office. "Is something wrong, Lord Hand?" Tyrion asked. "It saddens me that none of us had any idea of what Littlefinger was up to. And that the only way that any of this was found out was because of his attempt to murder me, and instead he put my son's life in danger, when his health is already in a fragile state. Lord Hand, should I send for Lord Varys to come here?" Tyrion asked. "Yes, please do, Lord Tyrion. We'll discuss all of this with the rest of the small council once Lord Varys has brought us some results. I think the rest can be allowed to hear what has been going on," said Jonarin. Stannis and Tyrion agreed, and after leaving the Tower of the Hand, Tyrion found Varys looking over letters in his quarters. "Didn't know you were such a popular man with friends," Varys Tyrion commented. "What makes you think that the senders of these letters are my friends, Lord Tyrion?" he asked politely. "Well, it is a guess with a few deductions. For example, I've seen you read letters before. You would stand whilst reading them. But here, you're sitting down and reading them, suggesting that these are important." "For the importance of the realm," Varys said innocently. "Oh, but of course. Anyways, Jonarin summons you to the Tower of the Hand," he said. "I see. Perchance is it anything to do with the meetings that you, Lord Stannis, and the Hand of the King have been having that wouldn't be including the rest of the small council?" he asked. "Why ask that when you have your little birds to find that out for you? Or, have you finally discovered a secret in which not even your little birds or even you could discover?" Tyrion asked. "Ah. The more mystery surrounding it, the more fun there is when said secret is discovered, as I'm sure you're aware, Lord Tyrion," he replied. "Indeed. Indeed. Anyway, best not keep the Hand waiting. He is in a sad mood right now," said Tyrion. "Thank you, Tyrion. If you'll excuse me," he said before both left his office. 10 days later, at the session of the small council, Jonarin said, "Now, Lord Renly and Grand Maester Pycelle, it is time that you were let in on a secret which had been kept under wraps during the trial of Littlefinger. The money which he had brought the Iron Throne wasn't magically conjured as he would have liked people to have believed. It was all borrowed. A total of 3.5 million gold dragons is owed to Tywin Lannister. But, the worst of all, he borrowed nearly 10 million from the Iron Bank of Braavos. A large percentage of the borrowed money, he had stolen for himself." Grand Maester Pycelle's normally red face from the heat whitened as white as his beard at the news, and Renly looked up in disbelief. "How long had this been going on, Lord Hand?" Renly asked. "Too long. But that doesn't matter. What matters now, is paying back every one of these debts and saving the Seven Kingdoms from absolute bankruptcy and the Iron Bank possibly refusing to do business with the Iron Throne ever again whilst funding Viserys Targaryen in his quest to claim the Iron Throne," he said. "Surely, Lord Hand, the money taken from Littlefinger's establishments is enough. Get started on paying back Lord Tywin as repayment for all the wealth he has so generously provided the crown for all of these years," suggested Pycelle. "That is true, Grand Maester. But I don't want to make any moves yet until we have found all Littlefinger's ill-gotten wealth. You see, Lord Tyrion thought that Littlefinger had most of the money stored in his family's castle in the Fingers, to hide it in a ruined castle that no one would think to look. I have just received word from Nestor Royce, and Lord Tyrion's assumptions were correct. A little over 8 million gold dragons was recovered from Littlefinger's castle, in cleverly designed vaults beneath the floors. But also, in Lord Tyrion's findings, he discovered that Littlefinger had a palace built in Braavos, which he thinks was his home in Braavos when traveling there to do business with the Iron Bank. And so, there might be more money there," Jonarin said. "Have we had word from Braavos on this, Lord Hand?" asked Stannis. "Lord Varys?" Jonarin asked as all turned to face the Master of Whispers. "My Lord Hand, my contacts in Braavos have contacted the Braavos government, and this morning I received a message that the Sea Lord of Braavos is sending a delegation to King's Landing to negotiate with the Iron Throne in regards to Littlefinger's palace and the debt of the Iron Throne," he announced. "Very well. With this, I can see no reason why we shouldn't get started on paying the debts. Lord Tyrion, ensure that the exact amount of money owed to Lord Tywin, including interest, is sent to Casterly Rock as soon as possible," Jonarin said. "I'll send a raven to my Lord Father at once, Lord Hand, and I'll begin the transportation arrangements for the gold this afternoon," Tyrion said. Tyrion wrote a letter to his father and then started to ensure the exact amount of gold dragons, including interest, 3,851,450 gold dragons, was to be transported to King's Landing. All of which required over 100 carriages and caravans and 800 soldiers of Casterly Rock and the Eyrie guarding it, commanded by Jaime. Tyrion found himself enjoying to be master of coin. He felt it was all a good use of his talents and his intellect. In the less than a moon since he had been appointed to the position, he was trusted by the hand of the king in important and delicate matters and was now in an important position to pay the debts of the Iron Throne and save the Seven Kingdoms from bankruptcy. As long as Robert doesn't spend an enormous amount of money on an enormous feast or on a tourney massive enough to rival the tourney of Harrenhal in the next few days, then all should be well. Chapter 13, Chapter 11. Chapter Text. Gendry 4. Gendry and Harold had returned to the Eyrie after the 2-week journey to Littlefinger's castle in the Fingers, which Littlefinger himself had once nicknamed the Drear Fort. An entire fighting force of 10,000 knights and soldiers of the Vale had been assigned to guard its transportation to King's Landing, to protect it most of all from the hill tribes of the Vale. Leading the enormous convoy was Sir Jalwood Hunter. At the Eyrie, a tourney was being held in honor of the return of Lord Robin. He looked a lot weaker from his return home from King's Landing. And he was always complaining and demanding sugary foods and demanding for his mother. If only he knew that it was his mother who had done this to him, though unintentionally, Gendry thought as he and Harold listened to a tantrum he was throwing when he was told that he was not getting any lemon cakes. Lord Yohn Royce, appointed regent by Lord Arryn, was entrusted with training Robin Arryn, now that he was no longer under his mother's terrible influence. This is the best thing that could ever happen to him. When she sees him again, maybe she'll realize just how stupid she was in letting him have whatever he wanted and still treating him as though he was a newborn and breastfeeding him at the age of 8. Sir Harold's wounds from fighting Sir Lincoln Bray had healed, though as Harold had said, wounds from Valyrian steel will always be there and the scars will never ever fade away. Why did he hate you so, my lord? Gendry asked after Maester Coleman had taken the stitches out of Harold's shoulder and cheek. Harold's face darkened and he said, in the jousting where I won and was knighted, I unhorsed him and I had hit my lance at his cock and balls. The Maesters had to emasculate him. Emasculate? What does that mean, my lord? Gendry asked. Ah, it means cutting a man's cock and balls off, Harold replied. Harold's aim with a lance is better than any other knight. He wouldn't have hit him in his cock and balls unless he was deliberately aiming for them, Gendry realized after he grimaced at the thought of a man's cock and balls being chopped off. But Gendry, as you know by now from being in court at King's Landing, not all lord, ladies and knights are good people. Especially a man like him. He had a particular fondness for little boys. When I had turned 3 and 10, he tried to rape me, Harold explained. 7 hells, that evil fucking cunt, Gendry thought, too shocked to say anything. I hit him with a practice sword I had happened to be using and ran away. From then on, I had promised myself that I would kill him, especially when he threatened to hurt Sissy and Alis on the day of the fight. And you did kill him, said Gendry. And I did. The Vale will not mourn the death of that evil scum. Not even his own family had any love for him. Did you hear what they did with his severed hand? No, my lord, Gendry replied. Threw it into a fire and gathered the ashes into a little bucket and threw the ashes into a sewer. Rather than bury it as honor would dictate. All that remains of his body is now at the bottom of the Eyrie, miles below the castle, where he is nothing but food for the birds, he replied. Changing the subject, my lord, but have you promised to look after Sissy and your daughter? Gendry asked, feeling akin to Alis Stone for her bastard heritage. Aye. They will join me at Swordsong as soon as it's built, and I've promised Sissy a job as handmaiden to Sansa Stark, once we're married. You're a good man, my lord. Will I come with you to Swordsong? Gendry asked, wondering what it would be like up there. Well, you could. But this tourney coming up, could very well be a chance for you to compete, and by the end, if you do well and win, you would be awarded a knighthood from Lord Royce, Harold said with a smile. Me compete in a tourney? I've forged armor and weapons for knights and lords as they had come to King's Landing for tourneys, but does he think I would do the same? I've only seen a few tourneys up close. Do you think that I could win, my lord? Gendry asked, feeling nervous at the thought. I think you could. Just as long as you pay attention to my lessons, and never ever underestimate your opponent and never lower your guard. I'll pay close attention to all of your lessons, Milord Gendry promised. Good man. Let's go and practice in the hills. There's a good place that I used to practice at. I had set up a few barriers there to practice before I jousted for real. Perhaps it's still there if no one has destroyed it, Harold said. The two took their horses and rode to the hills outside of the Eyrie, and then they came to a small clearing where there was a long line of logs and 2 straw men sitting on wooden horses. Each straw man had 2 stretched out hands and a large stone was on each hand. Now, the first part of any tourney is to be respectful. Even if you hate the man you are jousting against, you show them respect on the list. And you show respect to the crowd of spectators come to watch. And most important of all, you show respect to the organizer of the tourney, whether it is the Lord Paramount of the Vale, the Lord Paramount of the Stormlands or the King himself. You do this by bowing to them as you reach the middle, Harold said as he rode to the middle of the list and making a short bow to the invisible crowd watching. Then he rode to the start of the furthest away list and Gendry listened to him loudly say, now, what you need to do, is to aim your lance, not at the man, but at the rocks he is holding. Even if you fail, keep going. You won't move on to the second man until you've knocked off both. And if you do one but miss the other, you start over again. This is to help give you a better aim whilst on a horse, to keep you steady on your horse and to be confident. As you keep doing this, you'll get used to using a lance and wearing heavy armor on a horse. Harold then demonstrated by riding hard and knocking off a rock from the straw man's hand. Harold climbed off of his horse and said, put your armor on and take my lance and keep going on your horse until you've knocked off both rocks. Right, Milord Gendry said keenly. Don't sound too keen, it's harder than it looks, Harold advised him. If prissy little knights and little lordlings can do this, so can I, Gendry thought. But soon after a few goes, he had realized that Harold was right. It was several hours before Gendry had finally knocked off the 2 stones in 2 goes. Good man. Now tomorrow, we'll do the same with the other straw man. Now you will feel sore, tired and achy all over your body tomorrow morning, Harold pointed out. I'm used to that from blacksmithing and fighting with you and Lord Robb, Milord Gendry replied. True, but this is different. You haven't done jousting before, Harold pointed out. Gendry was annoyed that he was right and he woke up the next morning aching in his arm and legs. Before leaving to go to Harold's practice area, Harold had taken him to see a blacksmith and Gendry paid for the best suit of armor, shield and hammer that his money could buy, from working for Toib Homart, working for Harold and the money he had been rewarded from Lord Tully. The blacksmith promised him that they would be ready by the end of the week. Just in time for you competing in the tourney, Harold said as they left the smithy. They spent the next 6 days training on Harold's practice area. And they had entered Gendry on the tourney's lists. On the 7th day, they picked up Gendry's suit of armor, his shield and his hammer from the smithy. Gendry's armor was a steel plate cuirass with an image of a great stag charging with a series of lightning bolts in the background. Gendry put it on. Harold asked, how does it all feel? It feels good. Gendry said excitedly as he stood in a defensive stance with his hammer and shield. Father must have felt like this when he fought at the Trident and killed Rhaegar Targaryen, Gendry thought with pride. Gendry had brought with him a helmet he had forged in King's Landing, a bull's head helmet. Now, you'll joust to hit those stones again, only this time, you'll be wearing your new armor. If you're ever in a battle on a hot day, this armor will weigh you down if you aren't used to the weight of it, Harold explained. Gendry felt confident that his own strength added to his favor in holding his own whilst wearing his armor. He jousted for 2 hours and knocked off all stones in good succession, better than he used to be when he first started. You're definitely ready, Harold said with pride as Gendry climbed down from his horse, whom he had named Falcon. When buying a horse at a stable in King's Landing, Harold had told him never get the beautiful white horse that all the maiden ladies will swoon over. Always pick a strong and fast horse that will stay by your side. Lord Royce says that they make all the difference in a battle, some jousting or going hunting. And so, Gendry had done just that and had chosen Falcon, a tall and strong dark brown reach horse. In the tourney, Gendry had jousted against 4 knights and 2 lords and he had won. His final match was against Sir Robar Royce, the second son of Bronze Yohn Royce. Gendry had started in the tourney unpopular due to being a bastard, but Harold told him victories win them over. Don't let them get to you. He also told him if you unhorse an opponent, then show him respect and help him up and drink with him later in the tavern. That's showing chivalry, honor and respect, 3 important things that all knights should follow. Of all the knights of the world I could have been a squire to, I'm glad that I became squire to Harold Hardang and that Lord Arryn made me squire to his nephew. He is a good man, a good teacher and a good friend. He'll make a brilliant husband and father. He sat on Falcon and read it himself as Sir Robar Royce rode onto the lists. Gendry could see Harold sitting in the audience. He was glad that he had come to watch, it made him feel proud of how far he's come. He had told him that he wouldn't enter this tourney. I'm not competing for your sake. After you become a knight, I won't be as merciful and then we'll be jousting against each other, he said. Both Sir Robar and Gendry rode to the middle of the lists and both bowed their heads to Bronze Yohn Royce. And they rode to their positions. Gendry readied his lance and stroked Falcon's neck and whispered, "We're almost there, Falcon. Just one match and we're victors." "Begin," shouted Bronze Yohn. And as the crowd cheered, Gendry rode hard towards Sir Robar. Gendry aimed his lance at his chest and kept his shield up to cover his side, which he thought Robar was aiming at. As it came to impact, Gendry's lance had struck at Sir Robar's shield before his lance could hit Gendry. Sir Robar fell onto the ground as Gendry's lance unhorsed him. "I've done it. I've done it. I've won." Gendry climbed off of Falcon and patted his head and said, "Well done, Falcon. We're a good team. You'll get lots of fancy food for this tonight." He took off his helmet and saw Sir Robar struggling to get up. He ran up to him and pulled him up. "Are you all right, sir?" Gendry asked. Sir Robar looked surprised at Gendry helping him up. "Yes, I will be. Just a damaged pride." "Thank you," he said before patting his shoulder and shaking Gendry's hand. The audience was applauding both Gendry's victory and his show of chivalry. Gendry saw Harold clap and beam with pride at his squire. Bronze Yohn clapped and nodded in approval of his show of chivalry, in spite of defeating his son. Later that day, in a victory ceremony, Bronze Yohn knighted him Sir Gendry Storm and awarded him 250 gold dragons. In the tavern, Gendry drank with Harold. "How does this all feel, Sir Gendry?" Harold asked. "It feels so strange. A year ago, I was a blacksmith in King's Landing and now I'm a knight, and a rich one too. Not just a knight. You're a true knight. You've shown that with how you behaved on the tourney. Now, I'm going to give you one final piece of advice. Don't get too drunk and lay with a woman you aren't married to. For that is how Aelys was born," Harold said. "It's probably how I was born," Gendry said with a chuckle. "Yes, probably. But don't let that dampen your spirits. You're a knight now. I can only hope to get a good squire like you again," he said. "Harold. Thank you very much for all that you have taught me. I never would have come this far in my life without your help or your lord uncle's kindness," said Gendry. Harold smiled with pride and shook his hand and said, "And I'm glad to have had a great squire like you. But, be warned, next time there's a tourney, we might be facing each other. And you won't be thanking me then." They chuckled and then Gendry felt a hand on his shoulder. "My congratulations on your knighthood, Sir Gendry," said Sir Robar Royce as he and 6 young nobles of the Vale sat down with them. "Thank you, Sir Robar," said Gendry as they shook hands. Robar Royce introduced the 6 other young nobles of the Vale. "This is my older brother Ander, our cousin Albar, and these red-haired men are Jasper, Creighton, Jon and Michael Redfort. Are you all knights now, Redfort boys? Last time I saw you lot, you were all still squires," Harold asked the Redfort brothers as Gendry shook hands with Jasper and Creighton. "Creighton and I are knights, but little Jon and Michael aren't yet," said Jasper whilst Creighton messed up the hair of his younger brothers. "I'll be made a knight soon, just you wait and see. I've been squire to Lord Sunderland for 4 years now," said Jon. "Oh, sure, for a sisterman lord, you surely will be made a knight. But, how? From jousting like you were doing today? And getting webbed hands and feet from spending too much time in a bath of sisterman sea water?" asked the tall and broad-shouldered Albar Royce, his long sideburns already wet with beer. "My time will come, don't you worry," Jon insisted with optimism. "And what about you, Michael? How long have you been a squire?" Gendry asked. For about a few weeks, until the knight I served was killed, he replied. Lyn Corbray, explained Jasper. He was squire to Lyn Corbray. Did he touch him? No, he couldn't have done. He was a eunuch. Gendry looked at Michael and saw that he didn't look sad or hurt at the mention of his name. I hope that evil monster didn't hurt him, Gendry thought. Gendry saw how Harold's hand gripped tightly around his tankard at the very mention of his name. But you haven't had much of a problem with women, have you, little Michael? Asked Creighton. No, I haven't, no, admitted Michael shyly. He was a handsome young man with an innocent and kind smile, which Gendry thought he could imagine girls being attracted to him. Will you marry her before your lord father finds out and flee to Essos and become a sellsword? Ander asked. Who's she? Harold asked, calming and letting go of his tankard, though Gendry saw a slight smudge of blood on his hand, from gripping his tankard too hard. Gendry discreetly passed him a small cloth that a barmaid had been using to clean their table before leaving it behind. Harold nodded in thanks. Her name is Maya Stone. She's a guide through the mountains at the Bloody Gate. We fell in love last moon, Michael said shyly and with a blush, whilst his brothers, almost drunk, were teasing him about it. And Gendry saw a tall young woman walking behind Michael. She definitely didn't look highborn. She had raven black hair cut short, piercing dark blue eyes and a strong and square-like jaw. Michael, said the woman. Maya, Michael said, suddenly beaming with happiness at hearing her voice. He turned around and got up to kiss her and hug her. Gendry turned to Harold and noticed him looking at Maya with confusion. He started making repeated glances to both Gendry and Maya. What is it? Gendry whispered. Don't you see the resemblance? He asked him. What resemblance? Gendry thought. He then looked at her, the same sort of look that Gendry had seen Lord Arryn give him when they first met and when he by chance met his uncle Stannis Baratheon. So, Maya Stone, what are you doing up here? Come to watch young Michael piss his pants at a tourney? Harold asked. No. I'm just here to wish him luck at the melee, she replied, rubbing her hands over his shoulders affectionately. Who was your father, Maya? Do you know? Jon asked. No, I don't. All I remember was that he was a huge and strong man who used to throw me up in the air. I can remember giggling as he threw me up and caught me, and he had this great booming laugh. My mother never told me much about him. Just that he was from the Stormlands. Harold turned to face Gendry and gave him a glance as if to say, well. Gendry finally realized it. Does he think that she is my sister? That King Robert fathered her when he and Lord Eddard Stark were both wards of Lord Arryn. Gendry looked at Maya Stone closely and he could see that she looked like him. The same hair color, the same muscular build, the same jawline, and she had the same eye color. Best not try to seduce her then. Remember what happened to the Targaryens, Harold whispered to him. Definitely not, Gendry thought as he drank with Harold, the Royce brothers, their cousin, and the Redfort brothers. Arianne 6. Your work in King's Landing was excellent, Arianne. Not only making friends with the Hand of the King, the Arryns of the Vale, but also with the Starks of the North. Not to mention helping remove a dangerous and despicable man from the small council, said Prince Doran Martell. It had been a week since she had sent her report to the Water Gardens from Sunspear, and then Arianne had been invited to the Water Gardens by her father. Thank you, father, she said. Will this change his opinion of me and for him to recognize my right to Sunspear and not Quentyn? How quickly they get justice for the realm from a thief dressed in a lord's clothes, and yet, after less than 20 years, there is still no justice for House Martell or for Dorne, said her uncle Oberyn. It was well known across the world, the stories of the Red Viper's exploits as a warrior, as an expert in poisons, and his amorous adventures with his paramour Ellaria Sand. The younger brother of Doran Martell, he was close with their dear sister Elia and loved her dearly, and he loved his nephew and niece, Aegon and Rhaenys, very much. And in the years since their horrific murders, he had tried to get justice for House Martell, but to no avail. His hatred towards the Lannisters, and to Tywin Lannister in particular, were infamous. He was infamously promiscuous with men and women both, whom he shared with Ellaria Sand. He had raised 8 bastard daughters in Sunspear, nicknamed the Sand Snakes. He taught them all how to use weapons, of which the spear was his favorite, and also poison was what he was particularly infamous for. Whilst studying at the Citadel in Old Town, learning about poisons and practicing their use had become a personal hobby of his, to the extent that he had a laboratory in the old palace which contained his collection of poisons and the most poisonous flowers and plants from all over the world. I broached on the subject many times with John Arryn, Uncle Oberyn. And I could sense that he wanted justice, but Robert the Usurper thinks little of what he calls dragon spawn. Though Robb Stark made it clear that he was in favor of justice for Dorne, whilst reminding me that his family also lost loved ones in the war, Arianne replied, whilst hearing her heart beat really fast at the mention of Robb Stark's name and remembering his face. That's all very well. But House Stark had its justice. And yet, House Martell cannot, because we were allied to the dragons and my sister was married to that unfaithful shit-piece prick Rhaegar Targaryen. Oberyn replied. We must be patient. We will get our chance for justice. At the moment, we have little chance of achieving it, not without risking the lives of thousands of Dornishmen and Dornish women. But, right now, House Martell does have some form of justice at hand, said father. And what justice is that, brother? Asked Uncle Oberyn. The man who had slain our Uncle Luwin, is dead. Lyn Corbray was killed in single combat against the very same knight who had crippled him in a tourney. Crippled him to the extent that he had been emasculated, he replied. Ah, yes. I remember hearing the story, the funniest jousting story I have ever heard. What's the knight's name? I would be very interested in meeting him and thanking him, asked Uncle Oberyn with an amused grin. Sir Harold Hardyng. Harold Hardyng. Did I hear that right? Harold Hardyng, father? Arianne asked. Ah, Ari, do you know him? Uncle Oberyn asked with a grin, as though he assumed that she had fucked him. Yes, he is a friend I had met in King's Landing. Nephew of Jon Arryn. He and Robb Stark were always together, like brothers, they were inseparable. They both have a particular hatred for Prince Joffrey, she replied. So, they have no love for the Lannisters? Father asked. No. They don't, said Arianne. Be that as it may. The Arryns and the Starks fought alongside Robert Baratheon and did nothing to bring justice for Dorne, said Uncle Oberyn. If his father as honorable as he is, then Ned Stark and Jon Arryn must have tried to have the Mountain and Amory Lorque punished for what evil crimes they committed, only to be stopped by Robert. Arianne doubted her uncle's words, having spent time alongside Jon Arryn and Robb Stark. There was a knock on the door. Yes, Aeryo. Father asked. My prince, an important message has just arrived from King's Landing, said the powerful and deep-voiced Norvoshi warrior. Bring it here, please, he said. The door opened and a servant brought the letter to the Prince of Sunspear. Arianne saw the seal. A spider. Varys, she thought. Father opened it and read it. A change in the Game of Thrones, it would seem, he said as his eyes opened wide at reading the letter. What news, brother? Uncle Oberyn asked. Jon Arryn is dead. It appears he died from the bloody flux, said father. But not poison? Arianne asked. No. He tried a new batch of wine from the arbor, only to discover that the makers had suffered from an outbreak of the disease as well as the merchant ship which delivered it. Grand Maester Pycelle has been giving an antidote to everyone in the Red Keep because of it, whilst shutting themselves off from the rest of the world for a whole week, he explained. Who would Robert appoint as his successor? Father asked. Tywin Lannister. He may be responsible for many terrible things, but he is one of the few people whom can control the realm. It definitely won't be that idiot Mace Tyrell, in spite of the Fat Lord of Highgarden's efforts to betroth his lovely little Rose to Joffrey, said Uncle Oberyn. Maybe not, but it won't be Tywin either, said Arianne. How do you know? Uncle Oberyn asked. Uncle, I've been in King's Landing and I've seen how the usurper king behaves. He dislikes the Lannisters, especially his own queen and his Lannister squire. But, whenever he met Robb Stark, even in passing, he would act as though he was his favorite son, and I once overheard Robb Stark thank him for something and he said, "Don't say that, Robb, my boy. You are Ned's son, I would do anything for you and your father." I would say that he would choose Ned Stark to be his hand of the king. Will Ned Stark be any different than Jon Arryn? Father asked. No, They are both good and honorable men, if the father is anything like his son, she said. Well, if he's wise enough, he'll bring justice to dawn by handing us Gregor Clegane and Amory Lorque, said Uncle Oberyn. Hold, there's more. Father suddenly said, reading the whole letter. What more? Arianne asked. Robin Arryn is dead. Soon after his father. It would seem the poison weakened him to the extent that soon after arriving in the Eyrie, he died when drinking milk of the poppy. Poor boy. He was only 8. Harold will be Lord of the Vale now, Arianne thought. Catelyn 4. Catelyn had gone back home to Riverrun on her brother Edmure's invitation. She had gone to see Lysa, who was not the same woman she had last seen several years before. When she last saw her, she had only just given birth to Robin, and was obsessively protective over him and never once let Catelyn hold him or touch him. In contrast, when Robb was born, Catelyn let Lysa hold him. But Catelyn assumed that was because he was her first successful birth after numerous miscarriages. Now Lysa was just sitting up in bed, unwilling to get up, and her arms were curled together as though she was holding a baby. Lysa. It's me, Cat, she said gently. Cat. Sister. Where's my sweet Robin, she asked, not looking up but facing her invisible baby in her arms. He is home, in the Eyrie, recovering from what happened, said Catelyn. The Eyrie. Why is he not here? He needs me. He needs his mother. Where is Petter, she asked, finally looking up at her. Why does she talk about Petter? Doesn't she know that he almost killed her son? Petter is dead, Lysa, she said. Dead? Why? Lysa asked, her eyes beginning to moisten. He was executed for stealing money from the crown and for nearly murdering Robin and Jon, Catelyn said gently whilst sitting down on Lysa's bed. No. No. He wouldn't do that. He loves me. No, she screamed as she also started to cry. The suddenness caused Catelyn to stand up in shock. Maester Vimen entered the room and said, "My lady, you must leave." Catelyn did as she was told, but cried at seeing her sister like this. Petter, you evil fucking shit. I should have let Brandon kill you. You've done nothing but endanger my nephew and drive my sister like this. I only wish that your execution was more painful than what you got. If you were my prisoner right now, I would not hesitate in sending you to the Dreadfort and give Roose Bolton my full permission to do whatever he likes to you, Catelyn thought as she looked out at the gardens where she, Edmure and Lysa played when they were children. Before Petter came to Riverrun as a ward. Those were better days, Catelyn thought. Catelyn walked to Father Solar, where he and Edmure were sitting down. How is she? Edmure asked as he saw Catelyn join them. She got angry and delusional when she heard what happened to Littlefinger, she replied as she sat down. It's not been easy for her. It's been weeks, but she still is very unwell. I'm worried that she may never recover, said her elderly father. There was a knock on the door. Enter, said Father. It was Maester Vimen. He looked dumbstruck and sad. Maester. What is it? Edmure asked. My lords, my lady. Lady Lysa, she. What happened? Asked Edmure. She is dead. She asked for some fresh air. I went onto the balcony with her, and she jumped. Catelyn stood up and walked to her old chambers. She sat on her bed and cried. Lysa, I'm so sorry. I wish Father had never accepted Petter as a ward. And I wish that you had a happier life than the one that you had. You deserved so much better than this. You and Robin both, Catelyn thought as she recovered and looked around her bedroom and looked at old toys and hairbrushes and remembered all of the happier memories with Lysa. Her favorite memories with Lysa were when they would lie down on the balcony at night, look up at the stars and pretend each star they picked out was a sign of something that would happen in their future, whether gifting a handsome knight their favor or marrying a good and kind lord. Catelyn. Are you there? She heard a voice say from behind her closed bedroom door. Yes, she said. It was her uncle, Sir Brynden Tully, otherwise known as the Blackfish because of a joke where Lord Hoster had called him the black sheep of the Tully family, and her uncle Brynden reminded him that the sigil of the Tully family is a fish and not a sheep. He was a renowned knight and warrior, having fought in 3 wars. And yet, whilst he had never married, he dearly loved his brother's children, especially Catelyn. Whilst Lysa was Lady of the Eyrie, he had commanded the Knights of the Vale at the Bloody Gate. "Hello, Uncle Brindon," she said as they hugged. "Hello, Cat. I had hoped that your return home would have been for better reasons than the ones our family face now," he said as he sat beside his niece on her bed. "Her poor son. He'll never be the same without his mother," she said. But, my little cat, you should be with your father and brother." "There is worse news, from King's Landing," he said. "What news?" she asked. "The hand of the king is dead, from the bloody flux. And little Lord Robin has died from long-term effects of the poison whilst in the Eyrie," he explained. "The entire family. What have the gods done to them? What have they done to deserve such horror and tragedy?" "The world can truly be a cruel place," said Uncle Brindon. "Yes. It is. I cannot stay here for long. I need to be at Winterfell," she said, crying even more. Uncle Brindon hugged her again and whispered gently in her ear, "It'll be all right, my little cat. You still have your family here and your family in Winterfell. Whatever bad happens in the world, there will always be good to come," he said. "I pray for that to be so," Catelyn thought. She and her uncle eventually joined her father and brother in the Solar. Edmure's eyes were misty and red whilst her lord father looked stoic, but in his eyes, she saw a deep sadness. "What happens to the Vale now?" Edmure asked. "The lordship of the Eyrie will pass on to Jon Arryn's only surviving heir, his great-nephew, Sir Harold Hardyng," said Uncle Brindon. "Sir Harold? Rob's friend and Sansa's betrothed. Of course. How could I forget?" Catelyn realized. "Who will be Hand of the King now?" Edmure asked. "Well, there's word that Robert Baratheon is preparing a journey to the north, with the royal family and the half the court. It may be that he will be going to Winterfell," said father. "All of that way, and with that large of an entourage, he'll want Ned to be his Hand of the King," Catelyn said. "Would your husband want that?" father asked. "No. He told me a long time ago that he doesn't want to be in King's Landing." "Not after the sack of King's Landing and what happened to Brandon and to Rickard Stark," she replied, whilst remembering when she heard the news of the murders of Brandon, her betrothed, and Lord Rickard. She ran into her chambers, crying and slapping the wall and asking the Seven why they would take Brandon away from her. "Will you go back to Winterfell, Cat?" Edmure asked. "Not yet. I will stay for Lysa's funeral," she replied. "Good. It'll take place a week from now," said father. "I'll send a raven to Winterfell," said Catelyn, standing up to go to her bedroom. She wrote a letter telling what happened in Riverrun and what happened to Jon Arryn and Robin Arryn, and that Robert was going to Winterfell. Chapter 14, Chapter 12. Chapter text. Robb 6. Robb, Jon, Sansa, Arya, Brandon and Rickon had heard the news from their father that Lysa had committed suicide in Riverrun. Jon Arryn had died of the bloody flux and little Robin had died because of long-term effects of the poison whilst at home in the Eyrie. He thought back to when he was still in King's Landing and they were all alive. Jon Arryn was always good to him, his aunt Lysa was polite to him, though she would never allow her son to be far away from her. "What happens to the Vale now that there are no more Arryns, father?" asked Sansa. Their lord father looked surprised at his eldest daughter and said, "Sansa, I would have thought that you would remember. You are betrothed to the last one, Sir Harold Hardyng, or Sir Harold Arryn as he is called now. The great-nephew of Jon Arryn. You will be married a year from now when you are 6 and 10, he explained. Harold's name is Arryn now. And he will be Lord of the Eyrie. Is he ready for this? I should be there when he is formally made Lord of the Eyrie and Defender of the Vale," Robb thought. "I'm sorry, father, I forgot that he was Jon Arryn's grandnephew," said Sansa. "That's all right. Now, your mother is going to be in Riverrun for another few days, for her sister's funeral of course. And she also said that there is a chance of King Robert is coming to Winterfell." He looked at Robb as he said that. "Does this mean that I'll be betrothed to Myrcella Baratheon formally?" Robb grimaced at the thought. "It'll be a long time before she and I are wed. Even if it is to unite our families, why can't I make any decision in this?" Robb was torn. On one side, he was ready and willing to serve his family for the sake of family, duty and honor. But on the other side, he still felt for Arry. "Does that mean that Robb will be wed to the Princess Myrcella, father?" Arya asked. "Maybe, I've yet to hear from Robert in person." "But I'm sure that he will accept," said the Lord of Winterfell. Whilst his siblings had all left, Robb had stayed behind and asked his lord father, "Father, may I leave Winterfell and go to the Eyrie to meet Harold in time for his coronation?" "Aye. But as long as you are back in time for the king's visit," he said. "I promise, father." "I will be," said Robb. Robb rode from Winterfell that day to White Harbour. And after arriving at White Harbour, Robb took a ship to Gulltown. After arriving, he travelled with the Grafton family, whom were riding to swear allegiance to the new Lord of the Vale, Lord Drold Grafton, Lady Melessa Grafton, Sir Geridon Grafton and young Giles Grafton. They arrived at the Eyrie, a day before Harold was to be made Lord of the Vale. Arriving at the Eyrie, Robb was amazed at all that stood before him. He could see how Valarmen like Jon Arryn and Harold were used to the cold after living in mountain and hill country for their whole lives. At the gates of the Eyrie, a guard asked him, "Who are you, sir?" "I'm not a sir. My name is Robb Stark, heir to Winterfell," he replied. And at the mention of his name, another guard turned around to face him. Robb recognized him. It was Sir Vardis Egen. "Good day, Lord Stark." "Welcome to the Eyrie," he said as they shook hands. "Good day, Sir Vardis." "I wish it were only under better circumstances," he replied. "As do we all, my lord. But you are most welcome here. I'll escort you myself to the High Hall." Sir Vardis brought him to High Hall, where a feast was under preparations. And there, wearing a light blue doublet decorated with the Arryn falcon and a brooch with the Arryn falcon on it, was Harold. He looked uneasy and was breathing in and out a few times. "Harold," Robb called. Harold turned around and said, "Robb." He ran up to him and they hugged. "Gods, it feels so long." "I'm sorry about your Aunt Lysa," Harold said as they broke from the hug. "And I'm sorry about Jon. I loved that man like a grandfather," said Robb. "As did I. And Robin, he was so young. He never really recovered from the poison," he said, looking disheartened at just saying the words. "I'm sorry to hear about that." "How is Gendry?" asked Robb. "He didn't take Jon's death well. He loved him as much as we did. But he's a knight now." "He was knighted for winning a tourney," said Harold. "Good for him," Robb thought. "Robb, is that you?" a voice asked behind them. There was Gendry. He's dressed like a Stormlands noble, looking like the sort of clothes that would have been worn by Stannis or Renly Baratheon, Robb thought. "Sir Gendry." "Hello. How have you been?" he asked, with an emphasis on "sir," as the two shook hands. "I've been doing well enough. But I still can't believe that Lord Arryn is dead." "He was the best of men," he said, looking sad at the thought. "Aye, he was a strong man, in mind and body, and a good man, there was none better," Robb said. "That he was. And he would be glad to see how well you've done, Gendry. But I'm just sad that his son joined him so soon after his death." "None of them deserved this," said Harold. "But, are you ready for all of this?" Robb asked. "I don't know. I was barely ready to be Lord of Swordsong. But now I'll be Lord of the Eyrie. I don't know if I can do that," he admitted. "You can. Lord Arryn always told us that as long as you have good and wise advisors and you behave just as wisely, then you can fulfill your duty as a lord," Robb said, trying to assure him as the three sat down on a bench. "And how is Sansa, Robb? Is she thrilled about being married to me and leaving Winterfell to so different a place than home?" Harold asked. "She's nervous as one can be. But she is excited also, to meet you after all of the stories I've told her. All of them embarrassing ones about me beating you," Robb joked. Harold slapped him on the shoulder as the three chuckled. "Thank you for coming, Robb, I'm really glad that you came," he said. "And I'm glad to be here," Robb said. "Now, Robb, there's something I want to tell you that I never could tell you in King's Landing," said Gendry. "What is that?" Robb asked. "Lord Arryn met me when I was 8 and gave me an apprenticeship at a blacksmith until I was 16. And then he offered me to be squire to Harold. But after I accepted, he told me that he knows my father, King Robert. Is that why he was so scared around the Lannisters and Joffrey? That they would find out and murder him just for being Robert's bastard," Robb remembered. "I kept far away from the Lannisters, the royal family and all members of court and the small council, just as Lord Arryn advised me to do. He was paranoid that the Lannisters would have me murdered. Robb nodded and said, "Thank you for trusting me with this, Gendry. And I promise you that I will keep this a total secret." "Oh, Harold." "Hello," said a voice in the background. Robb turned to see a beautiful young woman walking towards Harold as he turned to face her. She was beautiful, with long chestnut hair tied into a particular braid, which Robb thought that Sansa would love. Whilst she was short, she looked very sultry and voluptuous, very voluptuous, just like Arianne. "Myranda, hello," said Harold, with a knowing smile. "I heard that you're getting married to Sansa Stark," she said whilst sounding a little jealous. "You heard correctly. We'll be married next year soon after her name day," said Harold. She smiled lustfully and said, "It is a shame. We could have been married. We could have, Randa. Though I think that I wouldn't be able to keep up with you in bed," said Harold. "Such a shame," she remarked again before walking away. "Well, Harold. Who was that?" Gendry asked with a naughty grin. "That was Lady Myranda Royce. She is an old friend from my days as a squire. I lost my innocence to her. She has quite the reputation, with men, but she also has a reputation in bed. Her elderly husband died of heart problems whilst in bed with her on their wedding night," Harold explained. "Poor bastard. Still, let it never be said that he didn't die doing what he loved best," Gendry naughtily said, at which they giggled. Harold was glad that his closest friends would be there for his crowning as Lord of the Vale. Soon after he was crowned, he knew that he would have to go back to King's Landing to swear allegiance to King Robert, as was customary when a new lord of one of the kingdoms was crowned. But he was hoping that he wouldn't have to come across Joffrey whilst he was there. But what worried him was that Robert would name another as Warden of the East until he was old enough, and there was a rumor that he might name a Lannister as Warden of the East. When it had become public knowledge around all of Westeros that he was to be crowned Lord of the Vale, he was sent many offers of marriage from many noble families across the Seven Kingdoms, from the great houses of Lannister and Tyrell, and many smaller houses which included many houses of the Vale and houses not from the Vale, such as the Hightowers of the Reach and even the Freys of the Riverlands. Each offering a large sum of money for a dowry. But then, he had to make it public knowledge that he had already been betrothed to Sansa Stark. Robb had told him a lot about Sansa and that he had heard the stories about her, and that she was a true northern lady, beautiful, sweet, kind and gentle. There was not a bad story about her. He wanted such a wife for his whole life, and that one who would always be a good and kind mother to his children. He especially wanted a wise mother to their children, for he had seen bad mothers and the product of their bad parenting, such as Cersei Lannister and Lysa Tully. On the day itself, he stood in front of all lords and ladies of the Vale and their families in High Hall. He was wished good luck by Gendry and Robb just before it started, and he could see them as they stood in the background. "Thank you for being here, my friends. My brothers," he thought, for he felt that Gendry and Robb were the brothers he had always wanted but never had. Maester Coleman walked towards him, with a book in his hand, a book of the Arryns of the Vale. Harold placed his right hand on the open pages of the book. "Here stands Sir Harold Arryn, great-nephew of the late Lord Jon Arryn. He is a good man, brave, true and honorable, and ready to fight for the Vale and the people of the Vale until his last dying breath," said Maester Coleman to the seated lords and ladies. And then, he turned to face Harold. "Sir Harold, do you swear to serve as Lord of the Vale for all your days and be a good lord to the people?" "I do," said Harold. "Do you swear to safeguard the Vale from all threats and enemies?" "I do." "And do you swear to teach your heirs wisely about their duties to this country, that they may teach theirs?" "I do." "Do you swear by the gods?" "By the old gods and the new, and on my honor, I do." "This man has sworn to be a good lord of the Vale." "What says the lords and ladies of the Vale?" asked Maester Coleman. One by one, each lord and lady of the Vale knelt to Harold and said, "I swear to serve Lord Harold Arryn as a good and faithful vassal." "The lords and ladies of the Vale have spoken, my lord." "It gives me great honor to award you this," said Maester Coleman as he placed an amulet around Harold's neck, a small falcon medallion in a silver circle with sapphires decorated on it. And then he placed on Harold's head, a bronze circlet, made from the broken pieces of the crown of the last king of the Vale, the boy King Ronal Arryn, who had surrendered to the Targaryen invasion. As he crowned him, he said, "In the name of Robert of the House Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Andals and the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, I crown thee, Sir Harold Arryn, Lord of the Uri and Defender of the Vale. At the feast, Harold ate and drank at the high table with Robb, Gendry, Bronze Yohn, Nestor Royce, Aunt Anya, Horton Redfort, Eon Hunter and Gerald Grafton. He had already received letters of congratulations from the Lords Eddard Stark, Tywin Lannister, Mace Tyrell, Renly Baratheon, Hoster Tully, Prince Doran Martell, Arianne and from King Robert. The congratulations from King Robert also included an invitation to King's Landing to swear fealty to him. He, Robb and Gendry met in his solar for a few minutes of peace and quiet. When he had told Robb that he had received a raven bearing a letter of congratulations from Arianne, he could see on his face a sadness. "Robb, what is it? What's wrong?" "Well, I've been betrothed to Myrcella Baratheon. But we all know how old she is. And, ever since I met her, I've started to like Arianne. And only 2 weeks ago, she sent me a letter saying that she likes me. I honestly feel as though this isn't any of her tricks. I do truly believe what she says," he said. "As do I. I remember seeing how you two looked at each other that night at the Tower of the Hand, and I remember seeing how you two said your farewells as you left, and I remember seeing her staring at you as you left. I'm sorry, my friend. And I'm sorry that you must wait another 4 or 5 years to marry Myrcella," said Harold as he patted him on the shoulder. "I forgot to ask. How is your bastard child?" Robb asked. "She is well. Alis Stone, her name is. I was going to have her come with me to Sword Song and have her raised with my children whilst her mother becomes Sansa's handmaiden. But now, I guess that they'll stay with me in the Uri," he replied. "What of Sword Song? Who does that go to?" Robb asked. "It's mine until I award it to someone. I can just imagine young knights and ladies trying to impress me into awarding it to them." "Has there been much of that?" Gendry asked. "Too much, my friends. Too much. For example, almost no one knew of my betrothal to Sansa Stark, and no one would have cared for my presence, back when I was a landless knight with no clear future. Lords, ladies and knights all looked down on me at King's Landing. And after it became announced that I would be Lord of the Uri, I was getting ravens offering marriage to girls from all over Westeros. Tywin Lannister offered a betrothal to his 10-year-old niece Jaime, and Mace Tyrell offered a marriage to his niece Eleanor. Both offered 100,000 gold dragons for a dowry. And more than 20 minor houses from the Vale, the Reach, the Westerlands and the Riverlands have sent me offers. It's mad, is what it is." "Did you tell them that you're betrothed to Sansa Stark?" Gendry asked. "I did. And I got no replies except from Mace Tyrell. Basically, saying that Sansa is all well and good, but his niece Eleanor is from a great, wealthy and powerful southern family and far more worthy to be my wife than, whom he termed, a northern savage." Seeing Robb's frown, he continued his words, "Not mine, Robb. I would never be so stupid as to even think that. And the southerners wonder why they aren't liked in the north. If you ever meet Mace's favorite son, Loras, in a joust, I hope you give him a lance up his ass from me," said Robb. "I would, but Renly Baratheon would get jealous," joked Harold, at which the 3 young men laughed. "Yeah, Uncle Renly would challenge you to a duel over Lora's honor," Gendry added, and they laughed again before there were calls for a dance. "Gods new and old help me, I hate dancing," Harold muttered as troubadours began playing music. "Have you got a new squire now that Gendry is a knight?" Robb asked as they walked downstairs to rejoin the feast. "I do. His name is Michael Redfort. Funnily enough, he is in love with a girl called Maya Stone, who we think is Gendry's sister," said Harold. Robb looked very surprised and asked, "How do you know that?" "We have some of the same face features. She herself said that her father was a very large and strong man with a booming voice and laugh, and that her father was a Stormlander. And she's the right age to have been born just before Robert's rebellion, whilst my father was still a ward of Lord Arryn, explained Gendry." "Does she know?" Robb asked. "We haven't told her yet. But I have promised Michael that if he serves me well for the next 3 years, then I will allow him to marry her, in spite of her being a bastard and any objections he may get from his lord father," he explained. "Do you have any objection to me telling Sansa about Alis and about Sissy being her future handmaiden?" Robb asked. "No, I don't. But do emphasize to her that there is definitely nothing between us anymore and that I was very drunk when we shared a bed, Harold insisted. I will. I just hope that she is better to Alice than my mother was ever to my brother John, Rob replied. Chapter 15, Chapter 13. Chapter text. Tyrion v. After Jon Arryn's death from the bloody flux, the Red Keep had gone into mourning. None more so than King Robert. He wept more than Tyrion had ever seen a man weep. For the first time in their entire marriage, Tyrion saw Cersei look at her husband with pity. Joffrey didn't even bother to come along and pay his respects at the Great September of Baelor. And in accordance with his last wishes, Jon Arryn's remains were buried in the Eyrie. But before he died, he did do a lot of good, Tyrion thought. He had entrusted Tyrion with meeting Sir Jalwood Hunter and to collect all Littlefinger's gold taken from the Fingers, but then he stayed behind to collect Lord Arryn's remains and transport the much-loved man back home to the Eyrie. With this money, they had paid back more than half of the debt owed to the Iron Bank, now that all debts to Tywin Lannister had been paid. And whilst Jon Arryn was ill with the bloody flux, Tyrion, Renly and Stannis Baratheon met with a Braavos delegation, who allowed them permission to send a force to Braavos to search Littlefinger's palace. Jon Arryn had sent Stannis to do it himself, because I trust him to be the last person in the whole of the Seven Kingdoms who would steal just one dragon for his pocket. Stannis had found over 2.5 million gold dragons in Littlefinger's palace and ensured its sale to the Braavos government, who bought it for 100,000 gold dragons, and it was gifted by the Sea Lord to his favorite courtesan, Beledgeria Otherys, the Black Pearl of Braavos. Gods, a night with the Black Pearl of Braavos, that would be a night to remember. The remaining amounts had been paid to the Iron Bank, leaving the Iron Throne with 1 million gold dragons to spare. But when Stannis had returned from Braavos, Jon Arryn had finally succumbed to the disease. Cersei told her husband that the new hand of the king should be father or even Jaime. Jaime. Of all people. The man cares not for court intrigues or for the Game of Thrones. He is a knight and a warrior and already a knight of the Kingsguard. He lives for battle and for war, Tyrion wanted to tell his idiot sister. But no. Tyrion already knew who Robert was going to name as the new hand of the king. He is going to name Ned Stark as the Hand of the King, no doubt because he is the only person left whom he truly trusts, and because he thinks that there are too many Lannisters in King's Landing anyway. Well, whoever it is, will have an easier time ruling now that all of the Iron Throne's debts are paid, Tyrion thought. Stannis had left King's Landing and sailed to his seat at Dragonstone, without explanation, soon after hearing of Jon Arryn's death. But, 3 days before Robert was scheduled to lead his family and half of the court to Winterfell, they had to wait to receive the new Lord of the Vale, Sir Harold Arryn, as he came to the capital to swear his fealty. He arrived 10 days after being crowned the new Lord of the Eyrie and Defender of the Vale. By right, he was the rightful Warden of the East, but such a title could only be awarded by the king. Tyrion knew that this was the same Sir Harold Hardyng that was the guest of Jon Arryn, but very few in court knew that also, or even remembered him. I doubt any courtier or noble here ever asked him if he was related to Jon Arryn. If they had, they would know that he had a claim to the Eyrie and that he was second in line. Back then they wouldn't have been interested in him, for they just saw him as another unimportant knight. At court, Tyrion stood with Jaime as usual, with Myrcella and Tommen. Your Grace, Sir Harold Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie and Defender of the Vale, announced the courtier. Robert lazily waved him aside, and then Harold stepped forth and bowed to King Robert whilst many ladies of court were giggling, gossiping and chattering about how handsome he was. And yet, Harold did not glance at any of them, nor did he bask in their reactions about his presence. Welcome back to King's Landing, Sir Harold. I'm sorry that you came all this way just to swear an oath to an old king when you must be wanting to be back home and getting used to your new role. Your Grace, it is my honor to come to the capital and greet my king and swear my fealty to you, said Harold. Lord Harold Arryn, I would name you Warden of the East, said Robert after Harold had sworn to serve Robert as a good and faithful bannerman. Thank you for this great honor, Your Grace, said Harold, bowing his head to Robert. Tyrion noticed that Cersei looked annoyed with her husband's decision. Why did she think that making Jaime the Warden of the East was a good idea? The proud lords and ladies of the Vale, such as Bronze Yohn Royce, Horton Redfort and Anya Waynwood, would never accept a foreigner as the Warden of the East, especially one whom has no familial background or connection to the Vale. And as Harold faced the king, he saw him dart his eyes to the king's right. Joffrey was there, Tyrion could see, and Joffrey was angry. Very angry. And for a brief moment, just as Robert turned to make some joke to the court, Tyrion saw anger in Harold's eyes directed at Joffrey, and he clenched both of his fists as though he wanted to punch Joffrey bloody. Not surprising after he tried to murder Harold's best friend twice. I don't think Joffrey is too happy to be reminded of his defeat to Sir Harold Arryn, Tyrion told Jaime. Yes, I wonder why. Arryn is an exceptional fighter for his age, both with a lance and with a sword. I recently heard that he killed Sir Lyn Corbray after he had challenged Arryn to a duel, said Jaime with admiration, and he knew who all of the best fighters were in Westeros. Lyn Corbray was one of them. Why did a man like Lyn Corbray challenge him to a duel? Apparently because he won a tourney by unhorsing Corbray when he struck his lance into Corbray's cock and balls. The Maestas had to emasculate him because of it. Tyrion chuckled and said, there's a fate which makes Varys' castration seem like little more than a scratch. After Harold sworn his fealty to King Robert and he had risen and kissed the hand of Cersei, who gave him a false and cold smile. Harold gave a short nod to Joffrey and started to mingle with the rest of the court once King Robert had dismissed the court, whilst Tyrion and Jaime walked toward Cersei. A young and very handsome knight and now Lord Paramount of the Vale. Many women would be envious of whomever marries him, said Jaime. They would be marrying a pompous knight who thinks himself a great lord. He's not even a man. He's a boy, Cersei snapped. So is Joffrey, and yet you talk of him as though he is a fully grown young man, Tyrion thought. Ah, but you must be looking forward to traveling to the north, Tyrion. To see the wall as you've always wanted to, Jaime said, trying to change the subject. That I have. And if they are all like Robb Stark at Winterfell, I'm sure that they will be pleasant, but boring, company, he said. And of course, his sister, Sansa, will be marrying Joffrey, said Cersei as Joffrey scowled off in anger at watching Harold Arryn be fawned over by the young ladies of court and their parents. Harold Arryn did not look impressed by any of them, no matter how pretty the girls were or how much they and their parents complimented him. Well, he's taking his betrothal very seriously, the Starks would be very glad to see that. But come to think of it, how come Cersei thinks Sansa Stark will marry Joffrey? I thought that she had her own spies and was well aware of things like this. Apparently not. I don't think so, Cersei. From when I last talked with Sir Harold, it would seem that he has been betrothed to Sansa Stark ever since Robb recommended him to his parents whilst they were still in King's Landing, Tyrion said. Cersei turned to him and said, you're lying. No, I'm not. Go and ask him yourself, said Tyrion with a grin which he knew was the facial expression which Cersei hated the most. She scowled so much that she almost looked like Stannis Baratheon, but with long and golden hair and smoother cheekbones, as she walked to Sir Harold. Were you being serious? About him and Sansa Stark? Jaime asked. Very. Arianne Martell said it herself in her testimony at Littlefinger's trial, that they were celebrating his betrothal and him being named lord of a newly built castle in the Vale. I suppose Robert and Ned Stark will try and find another way for their houses to be united, Tyrion replied as Harold talked to Cersei and gave her an answer she didn't seem too happy to hear. Was all Jaime said as Cersei returned to them. Well? Tyrion asked with his annoying grin. How did you know? Cersei demanded. Not only are you stupid and blind, but you're apparently deaf as well, Tyrion thought. I told you. We were talking when he was still here as Jon Arryn's guest. And he had told me that Robb Stark had put in a very good word for him to his parents about how good of a match he is for Sansa, Tyrion explained. But why would they agree to it? Sansa is a perfect match for Joffrey, Cersei said, as though Joffrey was the most perfect young man for any highborn lady to be betrothed to, even if he wasn't the crown prince. Tyrion sighed and rolled his eyes and said, do you really think that Robb Stark would trust Joffrey with his sister? Especially after he tried to backstab him, twice, and in a duel that Joffrey lost. Cersei angrily said Joffrey didn't mean to get carried away. He was tricked into it by that Martell whore. And he was angry that day. But still, do you think that Robb Stark would have accepted those excuses when he never received an apology from Joffrey or from you? Tyrion asked before walking away. All of this arguing is making me thirsty. Robb 7. Robb left for Winterfell the same day that Harold had left for King's Landing. Be careful in King's Landing and beware of any short and impotent golden-haired idiots with shriveled balls and a crossbow whilst you're there, Rob said. I'll watch my back, definitely. Gendry is coming with me, said Harold. You're going back to King's Landing, Gendry? Rob asked. No, Rob. I'll join for half of the journey and then I'm going to Storm's End and see what it's like there, embrace my heritage and see what I can do to earn a living, Gendry replied. Well, good luck and I hope you find something worth your while there, Rob said before he shook hands with his friends. Rob arrived in Winterfell a week after leaving the Eyrie. And soon after arriving, he asked to meet Sansa in his room. What is wrong? Is the betrothal cancelled? She asked with worry. No, Sansa. Harold is very excited to meet you and to marry you when you're of age. But he wanted me to tell you this before you heard it from anyone else, he started. What is it? She asked with worry. Less than 2 years ago, Harold won a tourney in which he was rewarded with money and a knighthood. And soon after his victory, he got drunk in a tavern. So drunk in fact, that when he woke up, he realized that he was in bed in the tavern where he had been drinking. He was in bed with the tavern maid. And a moon later, she told him that she was carrying his child. He gave her all of his tourney winnings and promised to be there for her and their child. So, he has a bastard? Sansa asked, her worried expression turned to an angry frown. Yes. And he is intent on keeping his promise and always protecting his daughter. Her name is Alis Stone. I've met her and she is an adorable and beautiful little girl who looks a lot like her father. Harold has promised them both that Alis and her mother, Sissy, will have a place in the Eyrie. And he was planning on having Sissy as your handmaiden, Rob explained. Sansa sat down on his bed and said, Rob, how can I live under the same roof as a girl who would be my husband's daughter from another woman? A woman whom would be my handmaiden. Sansa, you've got a brother from another mother. And Jon is a good man, in spite of what mother would want you to believe. Alis is not at fault for her parents' mistakes. No bastard is. And it would be your children with him who would inherit and bear the name Arryn. Harold was a young knight who didn't know that he would be lord of the Eyrie one day. But he has done this for his daughter and her mother because he is a good man. He has always been a good man. And with you at his side, he can be a good lord, a good husband and a good father. Sansa nodded, understanding what he said. I know. I know that this is not the perfect marriage that you wanted. But it will still be a happy marriage. Look at mother and father. They had an arranged marriage and from the day that they married to today, they are happy and they love each other. And I promise that if he is unfaithful to you, I will more than happily chop his balls off. All right, Rob. Thank you for telling me, Sansa replied. Do you still want to marry him? He asked. I do. I still want to marry him, but only if he will be faithful to me and if he will love me, she said. He will, Sansa. And I know that this isn't easy for you, Sansa. But he is a good man, he will treat you well and make you happy. I can promise you that, Rob said as he held Sansa's hand. All of Winterfell was being prepared for the arrival of the king and his entourage. Rob had seen Bran climbing walls as he usually did, much to his mother's vexation, and often the way to tell was when Summer was waiting patiently for Brandon at the bottom of a wall or a tower. Rob eventually made Bran promise to keep mother happy, always bring a barrow or a wagon of hay and place it at the bottom of wherever you climb in case you do fall. Rob often spent the time practicing with Theon and with Jon Snow. But a day before the king was expected to arrive, Rob had received a letter from Arianne. He felt his heart beating really fast as he picked up the letter from Maester Luwin and saw the seal of House Martell on the letter. A part of him didn't want to open the letter as he sat down in his room. Finally, he opened it, taking a few deep breaths as he opened it. Rob. As much as I want to congratulate you on your upcoming betrothal to Princess Myrcella Baratheon, I feel as though 4 or 5 years is too long to wait to get married. For that, I'm sorry for you. Whilst it saddens me that your parents have thrust this upon you, I am glad to know that you like me as I like you. Even if it wasn't meant to be, I am glad to have met you, Rob. Goodbye. Arry. Goodbye, Arry, Rob thought as he put the letter aside. Why did the old gods have to be so cruel as to make a woman like Arianne Martell? And why did I have to be the one to like her and for her to like me? Where's the sense in that? Rather than burn the letter, Rob put the letter in his desk. I don't want to forget you, Ari, Rob thought as he tucked it with the other letter from her. Rob was unhappy for most of the day as he thought about Ariane. Is something wrong, Rob? John asked as he found Rob sitting on the practice yard and playing with Grey Wind. I told Ariane Martel about my planned betrothal to Myrcella Baratheon, he said. I thought that there was nothing between you and Ariane Martel. John asked. I never said that. I said that we hadn't fucked or even kissed. But I like her. And she likes me. Anyway, I told her and I just got a letter from her saying that though she wants me to be happy with Myrcella, she is glad that I like her as she likes me. I don't know, John. Why does the world have to be such a confusing place? Rob asked as he put his head in his hands. The next morning, Rob, John and Theon had their hair cut and their beards shaved in preparation for the king's arrival, by order of Rob's lady mother. Do the Southerners all like having hairless faces? Theon asked as his beard was being shaved. No, it's just the Queen hates beards, mostly because the king has a big one. And Mother wants us all looking clean and ladylike for them, and not look like the Wildings, as she put it, said Rob. What's the prince going to say when he sees you and finds out that you're going to marry his sister? John asked. Probably challenge me to a duel again, only this time he'll probably have his sworn sword, Sandor Clegane, the Hound, do his fighting for him, Rob replied. Fucking coward, is he? Theon asked. That and more. He prefers fighting his battles with a crossbow, Rob replied. Chapter 16, Chapter 14. Chapter text. Catelyn v. Ned and Catelyn stood at the front of their family as the Kingsguard were the first to arrive in their gold-colored armor. At the front was the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Sir Barristan Selmy. Upon taking his helmet off, he spotted Ned and bowed his head to him. Ned did the same. Ned always said that Sir Barristan was one of the best and most honorable knights he had ever met, but often said that he was glad to have never fought against him at the Trident. Following the Kingsguard was Robert. Rob wasn't exaggerating. He truly looks nothing like the legendary Stormlord who smashed his monstrous hammer into Rhaegar Targaryen and crushed the great dragon dynasty. And following the king, was the royal carriage, decorated with red colors and with golden lions. The first to climb out was Queen Cersei. As beautiful and as cold as always, Catelyn thought as she smiled coldly at the Stark family. And following her was Prince Joffrey. I would gladly feed you to my children's direwolves, you little fucking coward, Catelyn thought. And then there was Prince Tommen and Princess Myrcella. Rob's future bride. She looks very pretty. A childlike innocent smile on her face which seemed shy, but genuine in comparison to her mother's smile. Ned. Oh, by the gods, how long has it been? Near 10 years. Why have you been up here for so long, said Robert in a powerful and booming voice as he climbed down from his horse, using a large crate to do so. Try not to destroy the crate from standing on it, she thought. I've been guarding the north for you, your grace. Winterfell is yours, Ned said before the two old friends laughed and hugged. Cat. As beautiful as ever, he said, turning to her. Your grace, she said as he kissed her hand sloppily. He turned to greet her children. Rob. It is good to see you again. Looking stronger than when I last saw you. Have you been in Tonys? Not yet, your grace, said Rob with a polite smile. Ah, but it was quiet and boring without you in King's Landing. Will you join us in King's Landing again? Perhaps in the future, your grace, Rob said courteously. He then turned to Sansa. You must be Sansa. By the gods, you are beautiful, just like your mother, my lady. My congratulations to you on your betrothal to Sir Harold Arryn. He's a good young man, he said. Thank you very much, your grace, said Sansa sweetly with a smile and a fine curtsy. He next turned to Arya. Hello. You must be Arya, he said. Yes, your grace, she said with a reluctant curtsy. He paused, as though he recognized something about her. Ned always said that she had the wolf blood in her, like Lyanna and like Brandon. He probably sees Lyanna in her. What's wrong? You meet your king for the first time and you think he's a big fat man, he said with a joking voice, at which she giggled. There, a smile. Good that it's not so cold up here that you forget how to laugh, isn't it? He knelt down to greet Bran. "Hello there, my boy. You must be Bran." "I am, your grace," he said. "You. Look at those strong hands, those are the hands of a knight." "Have you been getting into fights?" he asked. "Yes, your grace." "Have you been winning?" "Yes, your grace," he replied. "Ah. Good lad. Maybe one day you'll outfight your brother and laugh at him whilst he's crawling away, eh?" he said with a playful smack on his shoulder as Bran giggled. He then turned to Rickon. "And here we have the youngest. You look like a little wolf, yourself, don't you, Rickon? Will you be a great big warrior like your brothers and your old father?" "Yes, I will, your grace," he replied. "Good lad. I should bring you down to King's Landing. You and your little wolf there will scare all of the small folk and send them scurrying to the hills." Rickon giggled and Robert walked back to Ned, his large belly waving around as he walked. Cersei approached Ned and Catelyn and they knelt and kissed her hand. "My queen," they said as she smiled at them coldly. "Does anything make her truly happy?" Catelyn wondered. "Ned, take me to your crypts." "I would like to pay my respects," said Robert. Ned smiled, he was happy that Robert still remembered her, remembered Lyanna. "We've been riding for a whole moon, my love." "Surely the dead can wait," said Cersei. "My love. You hardly seem like a loving wife, more like a prideful lioness that cannot wait for her husband to die," Catelyn thought as Robert ignored her and bid Ned escort him, though Catelyn could hear him pant as he followed Ned to the Winterfell crypts, where all Starks have been buried for the last 8,000 years. Catelyn noticed Robb and Joffrey look at each other with dark looks of hatred. "I've already made plans to keep them separate from each other, lest they try to fight with actual steel on the practice yard rather than blunted swords." Catelyn and Maester Luwin escorted the court into the Great Keep of Winterfell. Ned and Robert returned from the crypt after an hour down there. Catelyn saw Robb warmly greet Sir Barristan Selmy, Tyrion and Jaime Lannister, but not anyone else. Not the Queen and especially not Joffrey. But he was kind and welcoming to Tommen and to Myrcella. In spite of how reluctant and unhappy he seemed to be at the thought of marrying Myrcella one day, Robb was good to her and gifted her some lavender flowers, which surprised Catelyn. Of all flowers you could have gifted her, you got her some lavenders. Why not some blue winter roses? But then, she saw Myrcella beam at him at receiving them and say "Thank you very much, my lord." She even decorated her hair with a few of them. "Oh, okay. He clearly knows more about her than I do," Catelyn thought. Tyrion 6. On the King's Road to Winterfell, soon after passing Moat Cailin, Cersei had tried to persuade Robert to force Ned to break the betrothal between Sansa Stark and Harrold Arryn. Badly. "Sansa is the perfect bride for Joffrey. This is your chance to unite our two houses as you've always wanted. The Arryn boy won't complain, he already has dozens of houses pestering him with marriage offers, including my father and Mace Tyrell. Ned has already offered an alternative betrothal." "Myrcella with his son Robb," Robert replied. "Myrcella and Robb. Well, by the time that she grows up, she will be a wise and beautiful young girl, and hopefully still won't be like her mother. She will make a good wife to Robb Stark and a good lady of Winterfell. And Robb would be good to her," Tyrion thought. However, it seemed that Cersei didn't share the same mind as Tyrion or Robert as he stood outside the royal tent alongside Jaime, whom was standing guard and looking bored and unhappy. "I'd be unhappy too if I was forced to listen to a bitter couple arguing all night long." "Drink, brother," Tyrion offered as he raised his wineskin. "Thank you," said Jaime, who sounded tired of listening to their arguing, and he reached down and took a swig of wine. "What? Myrcella is your only daughter?" "My only daughter. How can you even think of handing her over to these northern savages?" "Handing her over? It's a betrothal between two great families, not some wilderling bride-stealing ceremony. Does she remember when Robb Stark was in King's Landing and that he was as well behaved as one could be?" Tyrion asked Jaime sarcastically. "Apparently not," he said with a shrug as he had another swig before handing it back to Tyrion, though Tyrion noticed he looked upset at the thought of Myrcella marrying Robb Stark. "Probably is nervous for Myrcella being so far from her home," he thought. "Sansa Stark is already betrothed to Harrold Arryn. I can't ask both houses to break this marriage betrothal. Those houses are very dear to me. Myrcella is a princess, this was going to happen sooner or later. Robb Stark is a good young lad, he'll be good to her, said Robert. Tyrion could hear loud slurping as if he was drinking wine, probably from holding the barrel above him rather than from a cup. You are the king and yet you allow Ned Stark to command you around, said Cersei. He'll be Hand of the King soon, he's getting used to it already. Myrcella will be Lady of Winterfell and of the North, a kingdom larger than all 6 southern kingdoms combined. What is so bad about it? Robert demanded. Father would certainly be very interested in having his granddaughter as the future Lady of Winterfell. This may become one of the few decisions that he agrees with Robert about. Well, I wonder who the unlucky girl Joffrey will marry if not Sansa Stark? Tyrion asked as Robert left the tent. Move, I need a piss, he said as the 2 Lannister brothers moved aside. His belly swings around as he walks more than the biggest tits on any whore I've ever met, Tyrion joked, at which Jaime laughed. You should probably talk to Cersei, said Tyrion. Jaime glanced through the tent and said I'll leave her be. She needs some time alone. Arriving in Winterfell was cold. At least on the outside, but it was warm and pleasant in the Great Keep as he was being shown around by Robb. Heating pipes all around Winterfell, Robb explained when asked. So, how is it King's Landing with Littlefinger gone? Is it true he stole millions? Robb asked. And more. The crown was actually in debt to my father and to the Iron Bank of Bravos, Tyrion commented. No offense, my lord, but I can't think which is scarier, being in debt to the Iron Bank or to your lord father, Robb commented as he showed Tyrion to the Winterfell library. I think I can answer that for you, Robb. Not even my father is mad enough to take on the Iron Bank. Now, there are a few books I was interested in finding. Can you show me where the books on weirwood trees, Valyrian steel and ironwood are, please? Robb showed him to the books and Tyrion looked at them and said these will make good reading material whilst I'm here and when I go to the war. And, Robb, may I offer you my congratulations on your betrothal to my niece, Princess Myrcella? Tyrion said as he sat down in the library whilst Robb stood. Thank you, Tyrion, Robb said politely, but he didn't seem happy about it. Will you be an unhappy couple like her parents? Tyrion asked. I'm sorry, Tyrion, but she is a southerner and southerners often don't like it north of Moat Cailin. And, it'll be a long time before she is of age. No girl as young as she should be betrothed, he said. Your mother is a southerner, isn't she? And she's happy here. She has 5 northern children with your father. Give Myrcella a chance when she is of age, Tyrion replied. Unless of course this is what drives Cersei as mad as the Mad King and she has Robert murdered and breaks the betrothal, Tyrion thought. Robb took his leave and Tyrion started reading The History of Ironwood and the Strength of It, by Maester Kailas Flowers. Tyrion was impressed by reading about the strength of the ironwood and how it is the strongest wood in the world and that the only place to get it from was from Ironrath, home of House Forrester of the North. Maybe they should build an ironwood throne and melt the Iron Throne down. Tyrion had sat on the Iron Throne before and found it more uncomfortable than sitting on a mule whilst going through the Vale. At the feast at sundown, Tyrion was seated with Myrcella and Tommen. Myrcella doesn't know yet, Tyrion thought. As Tyrion was drinking, Robert and Ned stood at the middle of the dining hall. Shut up. Shut up, you shit, said Robert. The hall went silent and Robert announced, I'm pleased to announce the betrothal of my wonderful daughter, Princess Myrcella, to Lord Stark's eldest son, Robb. Ned Stark then announced the marriage of my son and the Princess Myrcella shall take place in Winterfell before the old god soon after her 15th name-a-day. And, myself and my daughter Arya shall be joining his grace to King's Landing, where I shall serve as Hand of the King. That is all. Thank you for time and enjoy your dinner. A far more polite speech than Robert ever could make, whether he was drunk or sober. Come to think of it, when has he ever been sober? Myrcella looked confused. Uncle Tyrion, what's going on? She asked worriedly. I'm sorry, my sweet, that no one told you. But, once you turn 5 and 10, you will be wed to Robb Stark. Now, you shouldn't worry. You know him, you know that he's a good man. And one day you would be Lady of Winterfell and the North, the largest kingdom of all Westeros, bigger than the rest combined. Tyrion looked across and could see Robb looking as nervous as Myrcella. He's a good young man, I shouldn't worry about him hurting Myrcella, not like her older brother, or ignoring her like her parents do. Jaime stood by Myrcella and said, "Don't worry, Myrcella. It'll be 4 years. By then, you'll be as tall and as beautiful as your mother and ready to be married to Robb. He would be a fool not to like you." Her mother meanwhile, was drinking heavily, not as much as her husband, but drinking heavily nonetheless. And she had offered no words of comfort to Myrcella. The rest of the stay in Winterfell was uneventful. Tyrion did spend some time drinking with Jon Snow and he was telling him about his intentions to join the Night's Watch. "I'll be joining you and your uncle on your journey to the Wall. I've always wanted to go up there and look down on all wildlings and creatures beyond the Wall and feel as though they are bowing to me as I piss off of the edge of the Wall," he said, making the usually quiet and stoic bastard son of Ned Stark chuckle. But as he chuckled, he noticed him look as though he was deep in thought. "Is something wrong, bastard of Winterfell?" he asked. "After 7 and 10 years, my father has finally told me who my mother is," he explained. "Oh, who is she?" he asked, curious as to which great beauty made the cold and ever honorable Eddard Stark forget his honor. "A Dornish lady, Ashara Dayne. They fell in love before Robert's rebellion. They had met at the tourney at Harrenhal and she gave birth to me before father found Aunt Lyanna at the Tower of Joy. They were going to marry before the rebellion began, but during it, father was forced to marry Catelyn Tully. My mother died giving birth to me and so the Dayne family gave me to father," he explained. "And how does that make you feel? Knowing at long last whom your mother is?" he asked. "I was thinking about visiting the Dayne family seat at Starfall. But I haven't decided yet," he replied. But on the final day of the royal party's stay in Winterfell had some tragedy, where young Bran Stark was climbing a tower and fell and landed on a haystack packed inside a small cart. Though he survived, a blow to the head from a wooden post on the cart had knocked him out. Maester Lewyn treated him, and said that he would survive and not suffer any permanent damage. When Tyrion had announced the news to his siblings, he noticed that same glance between them. What is up with these two? The royal party had left Winterfell the day after Bran Stark's fall and Maester Lewyn's assurance that he would survive and recover. Tyrion had left with Jon Snow, his uncle Benjen Stark, whom was first ranger of the Night's Watch, and a large bunch of criminals heading for the Night's Watch. Chapter 17, Chapter 15. Chapter Text. Gendry v. "My thanks for your service, Sir Gendry. Here is your reward," said Sir Ronald Connington, Knight of Griffin's Roost. For the last few weeks ever since he had left the Vale, Gendry had been going around the Stormlands and offering his services as a hedge knight if it was needed, whether it was to a village, a town's mayor or to a region's liege lord. Gendry's travels had taken him across all the Stormlands and he had been hired to find groups of smugglers, kill groups of bandits, and his most recent contract was to find a deserter from the local garrison at Griffin's Roost. The deserter in question had murdered a silk merchant and kidnapped his wife and daughter for ransoming from the merchant's brother. Gendry found him in the merchant's seaside home on the outskirts of Griffin's Roost and killed him by swinging his hammer into his skull as he went outside for a piss. His reward for this was 1 gold dragon and 10 silver stags. "May I ask, Sir Gendry, why do you take this way of life, when the life of a hedge knight is not a popular choice amongst knights today?" asked the Lady Alysanne Connington. "Quite simply, milady, I want to help people. And tourneys don't happen that too often. And my former lord always told me that a good knight should do good things in peacetime and rather than wait for tourneys and wars." "Then your former lord is a very good and wise man." "Who was he?" asked the Knight of Griffin's Roost. "He was the best man I've ever met, milord. He was Jon Arryn, the former hand of the king," said Gendry. When he had first heard the news that he was dead, he felt guilty for not being there, until he heard that it was disease that killed him. Gendry loved him like he was a father who raised him and brought him up. "How did a Stormlander bastard come into the service of the Hand of the King, sir?" asked Sir Ronald. "I was a blacksmith's apprentice, milord, and he offered me to become a squire to his nephew, who is now the new lord of the Eyrie," he replied. "Impressive. Well, I shall not keep you any longer, Sir Gendry. And once again, you have my thanks for protecting my people from this deserter," said Sir Ronald. Gendry bowed and took his leave. With his money, Gendry took his breastplate to a blacksmith to be repaired, for it had suffered 2 hits from arrows, and paid for a room at the nearest tavern for the night. He had already spent what was left of his money from Hoster Tully to pay a maester to bandage his wounds from those arrows. Gendry had heard Robb's lord father, Lord Eddard Stark, had become the new hand of the king, and that in his honour, a tourney was being held in King's Landing. Gendry was eager to take part in the tourney. Not just for the chance of money, but also to see King's Landing again. In his time in the Stormlands, he had read books from libraries that contained the histories of the Stormlands and the history of the noble house of Baratheon. Though he was a bastard of Baratheon, he was a Baratheon nonetheless. As Lord Arryn told me, I have the blood of the Storm Lords and the Storm Kings going all of the way back to the House of Durrandon, who ruled as the Storm Kings, and then Ois Baratheon, a bastard brother of Aegon Targaryen the Conqueror, who married the beautiful daughter of the last Storm King, Argella Durrandon. Gendry was proud of his heritage as a Baratheon, and he was eager to become a warrior. In spite of his pride in being a knight and being glad to help people whenever he could, he loved to fight. And so, with the grand tourney taking place in King's Landing, he rode Falcon towards King's Landing. It won't be the same without Lord Arryn there, Gendry thought as he left Griffin's Roost with his now repaired armor. Rather than compete in the jousting, Gendry decided to fight in the melee. He felt more confident with his great hammer in one hand and his shield in the other, and on foot rather than using a lance. He had arrived in King's Landing a week after riding from Griffin's Roost. It was strange as he rode into King's Landing. Everything and everyone just felt different to him. It took him a moment to be reminded of the stench of King's Landing. He coughed a few times as he breathed in and out a few times. As he rode through Flea Bottom, he realized that nothing had changed here. Nothing has changed here, no one has changed here, nor is King's Landing any different. The only thing that has changed is me, Gendry realized as he rode past a few street urchins whom were asking if one of them could be his squire. He signed up for the melee tourney, and it was as he arrived for the first day of the melee, he could see the royal family sitting in the stands, including his father. Gendry wore his full plate armor and wielded his shield and a large practice hammer. He also wore his bull's head helmet, that was his pride and joy from his days as a blacksmith. This helmet covered his face, for he was still paranoid about being in King's Landing and fearing what Queen Cersei or Prince Joffrey might do to him if they knew who he was. On the first day of the melee, he also saw, sitting next to his father, was a man with dark hair reaching down to his shoulders and a small beard. His face was grim and stoic. He was tall and built like a warrior. He also wore the pin of the hand of the king. So, he is Lord Eddard Stark, Robb's father, Gendry realized. He knew that his father and Robb's father were old friends from Robb and Jon Arryn telling him. And now Robb and I are friends, he thought, thinking it funny. There were 11 others in this melee. Amongst them were 6 Freys, a Hedge Knight, a Redfort, a Marbrand and a Euronwood. From his time learning in Jon Arryn's study about the houses of the 7 kingdoms, Gendry could recognize houses when he saw their sigils, just not the words of any house. The only words of any house he knew were that of House Stark, Winter is coming, House Arryn, as high as honor, and of course House Baratheon, ours is the fury. On a closer glance at the Red Fort, Gendry recognized him. It was Sir Creighton Redfort. He recognized him as he took his helmet off and scratched an itch, though Gendry could tell what he was trying to do. He's trying to impress the ladies with his handsome face as he takes his helmet off and waves his pretty ginger hair around. Why doesn't he tie it up like a highborn lady does, oil and curl it like Arianne Martell, and maybe put too much perfume and makeup on like Lysa Arryn, Gendry thought before he smirked at his own joke. Begin, shouted the tourney master. Gendry ran at 2 of the Freys, whom were poorly equipped, and one of their helmets looked more like a cooking pot than an actual helmet. Gendry blocked a blow from Sir Cooking Pot's sword and then from his shield, before he headbutted Sir Cooking Pot's defenseless face. He fell on the ground and didn't get up. He was bleeding from his nose and his lips and said Maeve. You fucking Azar. Small folk and nobles alike were laughing at him. The other 3 then attacked Creighton Redfort. He faced the Marbrand, whom was more skilled with a sword. He struck at Gendry's helmet. Gendry took the blow, it stunned him, but then as he struck at him again, Gendry blocked his blow with his shield and then smashed his hammer down on Marbrand's helmet. It was a light blow, but it knocked him down. No blood spurted out of his helmet, but his helmet was smashed in and he tried pulling it off, but he couldn't. Fuck. "This is going to cost me a fortune," he managed to say through his battered helmet. Gendry turned around to see that he was one of 4 left standing. 2 Freys, Creighton Redfort and the Euronwood. The 2 Freys knocked down Creighton when his back was turned and Gendry attacked one whilst the Euronwood attacked the other. The Free tried to dodge Gendry's blows, as he would have done if he wore light armor and fought with a sword. But Gendry was very strong and strong enough to fight in heavy armor and fight with a huge hammer and a big shield, and he was also fast even with all of this encumbrance weighing him down. Gendry feigned exhaustion, by pretending to pant and use his shield and hammer to support him, just like when Harold fought Sir Lyn Corbray. The Free charged, full of glee. Gendry dodged out of the way and then the Free ran past him and slipped into the dirt. He got up, angry that the audience was openly laughing at him. Gendry knocked him back with his shield and lifted up his hammer as high as he could. The Free held his shield up. But when Gendry struck at his shield, the force knocked him onto the ground. He panted and dropped his sword and shield. He looked up at Gendry and said, "Enough, sir. Enough." Gendry nodded and turned to his final opponent, the Euronwood. He was tired, just as Gendry was. Rather than charge head-on, Gendry remembered watching Sir Barristan Selmy fight against Harold in a friendly spar. He would make a few light hops towards his opponent, one to the left, one to the right and then straight on, and then you would be in front of your opponent and strike the opponent just as you land. Gendry hopped to his left, then to his right and then straight on, and smashed the full strength of his shield into the shield of the surprised Euronwood, which had knocked him back a few steps. "Now that's more like it," the king boomed at the top of his voice. "For the first time in my life, my father can see me and can see how much of a strong warrior I am," Gendry thought with pride. Euronwood struck at Gendry's shoulder and Gendry shrugged the pain as he struck at his sword midair. Euronwood smashed his shield and pushed into Gendry, but Gendry held his ground and pushed back at Euronwood as hard as he could. Euronwood's shield was damaged and he dropped it and he picked up another sword. He attacked Gendry with both swords and Gendry caught one of his swords between his shield and his fod and Gendry used his shield to disarm him of that sword by smashing his shield down at his armored fist and then smacking his shield at Euronwood's helmet, forcing him back. Euronwood struck at Gendry's hammer midair. Gendry used his shield to force his sword down onto the ground and then Gendry hit his hammer upwards and struck Euronwood. He stood straight, injured and disarmed. And Gendry dropped his shield, gripped his hammer with both hands and jumped and struck his hammer onto Euronwood's chest plate. Euronwood fell back and landed on the ground, coughing, groaning and muttering, "I fucking hate hammers." The audience clapped and cheered for Gendry. Rather than enjoy their cheering, Gendry remembered Harold's words of chivalry and honor. And so, he helped up Euronwood. "Are you all right, sir?" Gendry asked. "I will be, sir, when I see a maester and a blacksmith," he said before coughing again. Gendry helped up the rest of the opponents and people applauded him for this. When he pulled up Sir Cooking Pot, he said, "I'll give you some of my winnings to buy new teeth replacements." He looked surprised and tried to ask why. "Because you don't deserve this," he replied. But he heard a loud and powerful voice say, "Well fought, sir. Well fought. Come here." "What?" "My father wants to see me." Gendry turned and faced the king. He put down the hammer and walked to the king and knelt before him. "Rise, sir. Remove your helmet," he said. "Fuck, what do I do?" Gendry wondered what to do as he rose and then he side-glanced Marbrand and his squire whom was helping take off his smashed helmet. Gendry said, "Your Grace, forgive me, but my helmet is damaged to the fact I can't take it off." "Fine, fine. What's your name, then?" "I am Sir Gendry Storm, Your Grace," he replied. "Storm. Ah, good to see a fellow Stormlander here. And it's good to see that I'm not the only Stormlander who favors the hammer. Here." He threw him a bag of coins. Gendry caught the money bag and he bowed his head and said, "Thank you, Your Grace. Will we see you for tomorrow's final melee?" "Yes, Your Grace," he said. "Good man. Oh, I like you," he said before he waved him away. He made a final bow to his father and then to the Queen, who looked bored and uninterested in the melee. In his room at the tavern, Gendry counted the day's winnings. It was 100 gold dragons. I see now why knights love tourneys so much, not just because of the chance to show off skills, for easily won glory or win favors from beautiful ladies, but also for the money. Fulfilling what he told Sir Cooking Pot, he gave him 10 gold dragons for teeth implants. Gendry did fight in the final melee the next day. He stood against 23 opponents. 2 Hightowers, 2 Blackwoods, a Crickehor, an Estermont, a Dane, 2 Fossoways, a Bracken, 3 Freys, a Dondarrion, 2 Redwynes, a Piper, 2 Hedge Knights, Sir Davin Lannister, Sir Loras Tyrell, Sir Preston Greenfield and Thoros of Myr. When Gendry saw a Lannister, though a cousin of Queen Cersei and Sir Jaime, in a trance of paranoia, he was worried that he was there to kill him. Sir Preston Greenfield was a knight of the Kingsguard, whom Harold told him that he had beaten him on 3 occasions and told him that he had slow feet due to arrow wounds from fighting in the Greyjoy Rebellion. Thoros of Myr made Gendry nervous because he was using a literally flaming sword. And then there was the great and famous Sir Loras Tyrell, who was eliciting cheers, claps and sounds of adoration from the girls and women, small folk and nobles alike. He spent too long walking around the audience and waving at them, enjoying the lionization. None of you are his type, ladies. 2 tits,